Chapter 587. She didn't know what kind of species this giant yellow butterfly was, nor did he know its innate magic weapon, but since it blocked his sword light with yellow powder, it must be one of its killer moves. At this moment, he had already thought of a countermeasure. With a wave of his hand, the sword light flew back into his sleeve. When the giant yellow butterfly flew over, he had already disappeared. Jie stopped, her mouth opening and closing as she asked Jinghu, "What's going on?" Jinghu also didn't know, but another beast cultivator shouted, "Elder Dai, this person can use the power of the formation at will." The two antennae on Jie's head swayed and sprinkled yellow powder. This powder surrounded the team, forming a protective layer. After doing this, it flashed back to the team and changed back to its human form. It said, "Elder Jing, defense isn't my strong point. I'll have to trouble you." Jinghu waved his huge whale tail and said, "Don't worry." The blowhole on its head suddenly sprayed out a monstrous water column, which turned into water droplets floating in the air. These water droplets temporarily isolated the surrounding ice spikes and sparks, giving the beast cultivators space to rest. Moreover, as soon as She came out, these water droplets would warn him. "Greetings, elders." Once they were free, the beast cultivators saluted respectfully. No need to be so polite. Jinghu opened his mouth full of sharp teeth, glanced at them, and said in a heavy voice, "Where are the other demons?" A 9th-rank demon cultivator stepped out and said with a trembling voice, "Elder Jing, 6 of them are confirmed to have perished, and 3 of them are missing." Jie frowned and said coldly, 26 beast cultivators entered the formation, and now only 17 are left. You're really something. Although she didn't curse, her displeasure was clearly conveyed, and the beast cultivators were even more fearful. Beast cultivators paid more attention to seniority than human cultivators, and there was a huge difference between 9th rank and 10th rank. 8th rank beast cultivators were everywhere in the South Sea, and 9th rank beast cultivators weren't too rare, but 10th rank beast cultivators were rare. Jinghu said, "This formation is indeed something. We can't blame them." Jinghu's understanding made these 8th and 9th rank beast cultivators feel grateful. One of the 9th rank beast cultivators mustered up his courage and reported, "Elder Jing, we've searched, but there's nothing special about the array. Please guide us, Elder Jing." "Really?" Jinghu said, "The attainments of human cultivators in formations are much higher than us Yao cultivators. The so-called special objects don't necessarily have to be incompatible with the surrounding environment, but rather, they have to be objects with special energy." "Yes," the 9th stage demon cultivator replied respectfully. "Please advise me, Elder Jing." Jinghu knew that without a certain level of attainment in array formations, it would be difficult to find the eye of the array. Therefore, he did not blame these demon cultivators too harshly. It swung its tail and looked up at the world. The attainments of human cultivators in formations were beyond their imagination. Their mountain guarding formation could almost create a small world, which had its own rules of heaven and earth and its own circulation of spiritual qi. If they only treated it as an illusion, they would die miserably. Jinghu scanned the world one by one. The land above him had mountains, plains, deserts, and oceans. Except for the fact that there were no living creatures, it was almost a perfect world. The sky beneath his feet was vast and boundless, as if there was only the sun, the sun. Jinghu's eyes lit up, and an extremely fine stream of water sprayed out from the blowhole, pouring towards the sun. When it got close to the sun, the stream of water quickly dried up and disappeared into the air. This seemingly useless action caused Jinghu's eyes to light up. It could confirm that as soon as the stream of water approached, the sun would suddenly emit even more intense heat. This kind of autonomous behavior was one of the characteristics of the eye of the array. It shouted, "Attack the sun." Yes, the Yao cultivators responded in unison, each taking out a magic treasure refined from a certain part of their body and attacking the sun beneath their feet. Jinghu was its sharp teeth, while Dai Yi was its wings. The two 10th stage demon cultivators attacked at the same time, one white and one yellow, two sharp auras shot towards the sun. At this time, a figure in a white and blue robe silently appeared behind them. A red sword ray slid out from his sleeve. It was extremely thin, avoiding the dense water droplets, and slowly swam in. The Yao cultivators attacking the sun didn't notice that Jinghu's strength was at the top of the Yao cultivators, so they didn't expect to be able to avoid the water droplet barrier he created. The red sword ray slowly penetrated the barrier and touched the bottom. All of a sudden, the red light soared, revealing a murderous aura. The sword ray instantly crushed the water droplet barrier around it, creating a passage several feet long. The Yao cultivators reacted, and Dai Yi sprinkled a layer of powder again, temporarily blocking the sword ray. However, under the chain reaction, the water droplet barrier collapsed one after another. In just a few seconds, it was completely shattered, and the water droplets were swept away by the gale without a trace. The ice sparks, yellow sand, and gale that were blocked outside just now swept over again. In a hurry, many 8th stage demon cultivators didn't have time to defend and were hit in certain parts of their body. Dai Yi was furious and was about to change her target, but Qin Shi's figure flashed and disappeared again. Dai Yi, Jinghu advised, "We can't do anything to him in the Great Formation, so we can only guard against him. You take them to attack the eye of the formation, and I'll guard against him." He had to defend against both the formation's own attacks and Qin Shi's sneak attacks from time to time, so he had to concentrate all his attention. He couldn't just use a barrier like just now. Qin Shi didn't disappoint him. He appeared from time to time to harass Jinghu and restrain him. After another round of harassment, Qin Shi concealed his figure and said through his divine sense, "Tiange, how much longer can you hold on?" Any formation was formed by the energy provided by spirit stones, and spirit stones had a limit. Mo Tiange calculated that if the heaven and earth inverted formation was activated to the extreme, it might be able to kill most of the Yao cultivators inside. However, the two 10th rank Yao cultivators must have some life-saving secret technique, so they might not be able to kill them. After the thunderous strike, the heaven and earth inverted formation would overdraw its energy and wouldn't have enough time to exchange for spirit stones, resulting in it being scrapped. At that time, they would be able to protect themselves against two 10th rank Yao cultivators and one 8th rank Yao cultivator, but they wouldn't be able to protect the low-level cultivators who hadn't finished being transported. Therefore, they planned to reduce the formation's power in exchange for time. In this case, they had to share the formation's power. The formation would trap them and cause a certain amount of trouble, but it wouldn't be enough to kill them. The task of killing them fell on Qin Shi and Feng Ning, who were inside the formation. However, Feng Ning entered the formation without bringing her jade talisman, so she could only wander around the periphery. Therefore, Qin Shi was the only real helper. It was impossible for Qin Shi to confront them head-on. Even with the help of the formation, there was no way he could fight against a team of two 10th rank Yao cultivators by himself. Therefore, he could only harass them from the side to buy time. Mo Tiange calculated again and said, "As long as they don't break the formation's eye in one go, they should be able to hold on for 20 hours. 20 hours. Qin Shi heaved a sigh of relief. That's enough. It was impossible for them to break the formation's eye, because the sun wasn't the formation's eye but Mo Tiange deliberately disguised it. The real formation's eye was on the continent above their heads, right in front of them, the roaring sea. The Yao cultivators never expected the formation's eye would be so big. Seeing these Yao cultivators madly attacking the sun, Qin Shi appeared again. The 3-yang real fire sword shone brightly and he suddenly attacked. Jinghu was already very careful, but he still didn't expect that Qin Shi, who had always been harassing him, would attack with his full strength. This sword strike directly shattered the defensive barrier he laid again and even hit his body. The vermilion bird's flames overbearingly burned his whole body black. This time, it was Jing who was furious, but in the next moment, Qin Shi once again disappeared without a sound. As time passed, Mo Tiange became more and more relaxed, but Xianyue Monster Master's face outside the mountain gate became more and more gloomy. Listening to the movements inside the great formation, he almost couldn't help but want to call his subordinates back, but he restrained this impulse. He knew that if they continued to fight, they still had a chance to win. If he called them back now, the subordinates who had died in battle would be lost in vain. He also knew that if they persisted, he would definitely win. Because the Celestial Pole's Immortal Alliance couldn't send reinforcements, could they defend for one day or a year with just the few of them? Besides, what reason did they have to keep defending? However, he hoped that the price could be small. At least, the two elders couldn't be harmed. Inside the great formation, the light of the sun slowly dimmed. The beast cultivators all looked happy, and even Jing who was constantly harassed, spared some of his attention to pay attention to that side. But he didn't dare to be careless. That human cultivator had tormented him enough. He had reason to believe that as long as he made a mistake, that human cultivator would come out and give them a fatal blow. Fortunately, what he was worried about didn't happen. Dai flapped her wings, and a golden light flew towards the sun. With a loud boom, the sun, which was on the verge of collapse, was finally completely destroyed. The beast cultivators looked at each other in dismay as they watched the sun fly upward and finally fall into the roaring ocean, making a loud noise and even causing a tsunami on the ground. There was no shaking of heaven and earth, and there was no collapse of heaven and earth. It was just so quiet. No, those icicles, sparks, gales, and lightning were still fiercely attacking them. There was only one explanation for this. It's not the formation eye. Jing Hu said in a daze. If the formation eye was destroyed, the formation would collapse. The sun was destroyed by them, but the formation was intact, which meant that the sun wasn't the formation eye at all. The white-robed and blue-robed figures disappeared, and thousands of red sword lights suddenly appeared, blotting out the sky and rushing towards them. Jing Hu was in a trance. Only Jie quickly sprinkled yellow powder to block the sword lights, but it wasn't enough to dissolve them. He could only watch helplessly as the sword lights hit him. The dazzling red light wasn't enough to kill them, but it injured them all. And the culprit who killed them disappeared. Outside the formation, a sound-transmitting talisman flew out and fell into Mo Tiange's hand. The sound-transmitting talisman burned by itself, and Tang Shen's voice came, "Elder Yi, all disciples have been teleported." Mo Tiange looked happy and quickly replied, "You're also teleported. Destroy the transporting formation after you're teleported." She looked at the gloomy Xianyue monster sovereign, made a hand seal, and waved the formation flag. With a boom, the whole formation exploded. Chapter 588. Inside the great formation, sand suddenly danced, icicles flew, the sky sank, stars fell, and rivers and seas were overturned. It was as if heaven and earth were destroyed in an instant. The beast cultivators all turned to look at Jing Hu. "Elder Jing," Dai said doubtfully, "isn't the formation broken?" Jing Hu also felt strange. The collapse of heaven and earth was indeed a sign that the formation was broken, but why didn't it happen when the sun was struck down? Was the sun the eye of the formation? The gale grew fiercer and fiercer, carrying with it a boundless power, instantly breaking Jing Hu and Dai's defenses. The dozen or so Yao cultivators were caught off guard and were suddenly swept into disorder. Some of the weaker ones were immediately swept away by the gale. Jing Hu spat out a drop of water, barely holding on. He was horrified. This isn't breaking the formation. This is. Before he could finish speaking, his huge body was enveloped by lightning. He looked around in fear, only to find that lightning covered the whole world. Boom. With a loud explosion, the whole Bichuan court was shrouded in smoke. The mountain gate was blown up, the buildings collapsed, and the mountains shook. Xianyue Monster Lord reacted quickly. He showed his true form in an instant and fled several miles away. His true form was a blue water beast that looked like a qilin. Several figures slowly appeared in the smoke. Ba! 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 Feng Ning frowned without caring about her image and tried hard to spit out the smoke she inhaled. After she finished, she pointed at Mo Tiange, who was still floating like a fairy, and said angrily, Mo Qingwei. Did you deliberately watch me embarrass myself? She wanted to break the formation but didn't tell me, making me so embarrassed. When had she, Feng Ning, ever been so disgraced in her life? It was too shameful. Mo Tiange glanced at her and said lightly, why didn't others do it? Others? Feng Ning turned around and found that Qin was still calm, and there was no dust on his blue and white robe. She couldn't help but clench her teeth. This couple, Mo Tiange said, don't say I didn't tell you. It's time to run for your life. Ha! Feng Ning was dumbfounded. Before she had time to ask, her instinctive vigilance woke her up. 28 beast cultivators entered the formation, and 5 survived. 2 were in the 10th rank and 3 were in the 9th rank. Including Xianyue Monster Lord, there were 6 in total. As for them, there were only 3 of them. One of them was in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm while the other 2 were in the early stage. Although none of them could be regarded as ordinary nascent soul cultivators, their opponents were not ordinary Yao cultivators either. They were the elites of the South Sea. This was the only way to escape. Feng Ning waved his belt, and the Chinese harp appeared in his hand. His 5 fingers plucked the harp quickly, and the music suddenly sounded. The sound wave turned into a dazzling light and rushed towards Black Moon Demon Lord. Then, a talisman appeared in her hand out of thin air and ignited. She was surrounded by white light. Before anyone could react, she escaped in an instant. She ran really fast. Mo Tiange curled her lips as she watched Feng Ning's flight light disappear. Since the Luan and Phoenix Immortal couple was willing to let their precious daughter participate in the battle between the demonic cultivators, they were naturally fully prepared. It was not surprising that they could successfully escape under the watchful eyes of the 10th-tier demonic cultivators. Actually, they wished for nothing more than for Feng Ning to escape. In that case, they would have nothing to worry about. Qin Shi shifted his gaze and gave her a meaningful glance. Mo Tiange nodded lightly. Prince Xianyue. Mo Tiange smiled and looked at Black Moon Demon Lord, who had an unsightly expression not far away. It's fine to give the Eastern Sea to you, but you have to pay a price, don't you? Black Moon Demon Lord clenched his teeth but didn't say a word. Out of the 28 demonic cultivators, 3 9th-ranked demonic cultivators and 28th-ranked demonic cultivators died. How big of a loss was this? Although these demonic cultivators weren't enough for the South Sea, they would certainly be used by the eldest prince to attack him. He originally thought losing half of them would be enough. Jie, who was flapping her wings, snorted coldly. What's the use of saying this nonsense? You might as well leave your lives here. Jie danced lightly, sprinkling yellow powder that suddenly turned into sharp thorns that blotted out the sky and covered the earth. Go! Qin Shi shouted in a low voice as the 3 young real fire swords formed a sword formation. The golden thunder shot out, forming a vast thunder net that blocked the 6 demonic cultivators. Then, the 2 of them didn't linger on the fight and flew towards Demonic Mountain on their flight light. However, the 10th-ranked demonic cultivators weren't that easy to fool. Jing Hu's huge body appeared in front of them with a series of afterimages as if he was weightless. Then came Jie. The two 10th-ranked demonic cultivators firmly blocked their way. "Your Excellency, do you think it's that easy to get away?" Black Moon Demon Lord and the other three 9th-ranked demonic cultivators happened to surround them. Mo Tiange and Qin Shi looked at each other. Without giving each other a look, the red sword light swept towards Black Moon Demon Lord. While the other demonic cultivators were trying to rescue them, they escaped to the sea surface. Jing Hu was still using his unique escape technique, but Mo Tiange threw something at him. With a loud bang, Jing Hu, who was caught off guard, was frozen. It was the thunder bead Jing Xingji gave her, which could be used at this moment. Jing Hu was powerful, so the thunder bead could only block him for a short time. But it was enough. Mo Tiange waved her Fuxing sword and left a wound on him. Then she escaped without hesitation. Elder Jing. Black Moon Demon Lord was shocked and hurriedly rushed forward. Jing Hu's injury was very light, but when he blocked Black Moon Demon Lord, Mo Tiange and Qin Shi had already escaped far away. Second Prince. Jing Hu turned into his human form and sighed as he watched them disappear. "You have to learn to give up. It's very disadvantageous for you if you can't capture those two." Black Moon Demon Lord shook his head with a bitter smile. "Elder Jing, I've disappointed you again." "It's okay," Jing Hu said faintly. "We demonic cultivators have long lives. There's still a long time before the monarch abdicates. Second Prince, you have plenty of time to grow. Right now, there's still a remedy." He gazed at the sea. This was their demonic cultivators' territory. After flying for 3,000 miles without any pursuers, the two of them finally stopped. Mo Tiange patted her chest and asked, "Do you think they didn't chase us or do they have a backup plan?" Qin Shi put away his 3-yang real fire sword and said, "I don't know, but we'd better think of a way to avoid their pursuit." He looked at the calm sea under his feet. This is their territory. Flying to this sea was a helpless choice. Two 10th-ranked demonic cultivators were blocking their way and 3 9th-ranked demonic cultivators were behind them, so it was impossible to escape quickly. If they were delayed, they would fall into a chaotic battle. It was better to fly to the sea, get rid of them, and then return quietly. But it wasn't easy to do so quietly. Mo Tiange used her divine sense to check the surroundings. There were no high-ranked demonic beasts around, so she threw out the 10,000 miles canoe and said, "Let's take a rest first." The 10,000 miles canoe was called a canoe, but it could actually change into various shapes. The refining master who refined the 10,000 miles canoe was a refining maniac, so his eyes lit up when he saw the black iron heartwood. Although he wasted a lot of materials, the 10,000 miles canoe was refined quite well. They entered the 10,000 miles canoe. Mo Tiange made a hand seal, and the canoe quickly changed. From the outside, it looked just like a piece of wood floating on the sea. Inside the canoe, Mo Tiange arranged a spirit-concealing formation. Coupled with Qin Shi's peach branch, even if a 9th-ranked demonic cultivator came, it wouldn't be noticed. As for 10th-ranked demonic cultivators, it would depend on luck. "I'll bring Xiao Fan out." Mo Tiange entered the virtual sky world after giving some instructions. The Eastern Sea was also Xiao Fan's hometown. After the world changed, she didn't know whether the fallen dragon settlement was still in the Eastern Sea. Maybe she could find the Sea Dragon clan to understand the current situation in the South Sea. Unexpectedly, as soon as she entered the virtual sky world, she saw the whole virtual sky world was covered in a layer of red light. Mo Tiange was stunned. Xiao Fan and Xiaohua rushed over, one biting her sleeve and the other grabbing her hem. "What's going on?" Xiaofan said. Xiaofan advanced. Xiaofan was the name they gave Qin Shi's Chongming bird. Qin Shi had always been boring. He only had one spiritual beast and he only kept it idle, so he didn't give it a name. Later, he kept the Chongming bird in the virtual sky world and often played with Xiaohua and Xiaofan. Xiaofan called it Xiaofan, which the Chongming bird accepted. Qin Shi also didn't object. From then on, Xiaofan became the Chongming bird's name. Mo Tiange looked up. In the air, there was a cocoon made of red light with a hint of vermilion bird's breath. The red light illuminated the whole virtual sky world, making it look like the setting sun, covered with a layer of red. After Qin Shi learned the method of condensing vermilion bird pearls from Fei Fei, he often condensed 1 or 2 pearls and fed them to Xiaofan and Xiaohua, so they also carried vermilion bird's breath on them. After confirming it was the Chongming bird advancing, Mo Tiange touched the space between her eyebrows and left the virtual sky world. What's wrong? Qin Shi took out the map and looked at her in surprise. She only went in for a few breaths and didn't bring Xiaofan out. How did she come out? Mo Tiange took his hand and said, let's talk inside. After entering the virtual sky world, Qin Shi was stunned to see the red color on the ground. Then, he looked happy. The Chongming bird advanced. Yes. Mo Tiange pointed at the cocoon made of red light in the sky. Look, it'll probably break out of the cocoon soon. Qin Shi looked at the red cocoon in the sky and said, the Chongming bird is in the 8th rank, so it can transform. We have to prepare for the transformation heavenly tribulation. Deification cultivators and beast cultivators had to go through heavenly tribulation when they transformed. The Chongming bird was in the 8th rank, so it was fine inside the virtual sky world. Once it left the virtual sky world, it would face heavenly tribulation. Only when it successfully passed the heavenly tribulation could it become a real beast cultivator and gain spiritual intelligence. The two of them got busy. Xiaohua and Xiaofan squatted outside the door and looked at the Chongming bird in the sky. Xiaohua, what do you think Xiaofan looks like? Xiaofan asked. Xiaohua squatted on its hind legs and raised its head to call twice. Xiaofan understood the demonic beast language, but it shook its head and said, no, it must be a beautiful sister. Xiaohua called twice again as if it was protesting. It must be a beautiful sister. Xiaofan said angrily. Xiaohua called again. Okay, if you don't believe me, we'll wait and see. Do you remember the heavenly tribulation of the 3 beast cultivators in the Sea of Returning Ruins last time? Qin Shi asked while preparing spiritual plants to concoct medicinal pills. Mo Tiange flipped through the books in the bookcase, looking for information about the transformation heavenly tribulation. She answered, no, we were in the heavenly tribulation last time. How could we remember to read other people's heavenly tribulations? She put the book in her hand back and sighed. If only Fei Fei was here. It would know what to do. Since there were so many Fei Feis to deal with, she let Fei Fei go back to Kunwu with Tang Shen and the others. Qin Shi looked up at her. It's not good to always rely on it. Mo Tiange was stunned and thought about it carefully. Ever since Fei Fei gained spiritual intelligence, it had become a habit for her to ask Fei Fei if she couldn't make a decision. This was indeed not good. Although Fei Fei was her spiritual beast, it didn't belong to her. It would have its own path sooner or later. I see. She nodded. In fact, even if she didn't know what the transformation heavenly tribulation was about, it didn't matter. She herself had experienced a heavenly tribulation. Even if the 2 kinds of heavenly tribulations were different, there shouldn't be much difference, so she just had to do it. With this thought in mind, she threw the book away and said, then I'll prepare a defensive formation. Okay. Qin Shi nodded with a smile. Chapter 589. Beast cultivators took much less time to transform than human cultivators. Ordinary cultivators spent 3 to 5 years in closed-door meditation to form their nascent soul, and some even took more than 10 years. Beast cultivators, on the other hand, had a lot of time to accumulate, but the time it took for them to advance was very short. Therefore, in just half a month, the bright birds successfully advanced. In the air of the virtual sky world, the cocoon formed by the red light suddenly shone brightly. Xiaohua, who was crouching listlessly in front of the door, was startled and Xiaofan jumped out of the stream with a splash. The red light became brighter and brighter, so dazzling that people couldn't open their eyes. With a soft pop, the red light shell split open and a slender white hand stretched out. Then, the hand grabbed the red light, tore it apart with all its might, and stuffed it into its mouth. Crunch, crunch, crunch. After it finished eating, it elegantly wiped its mouth, landed from the sky, and walked to them step by step. Xiao Feng greets Master. Xiao Feng bowed in an impeccable manner and said in a soft voice. Mo Tiange was dumbfounded. She knew Xiaofeng was a female bird, so when it transformed into a human, it must be a woman, but she didn't expect it to look like this. Its female appearance was about 25 or 26 years old, with white skin, red lips, a charming posture, mysterious double pupils, and a mature and enchanting aura. This didn't match Qin Shi at all. It was really strange. Previously, the bright bird's temperament was very similar to Qin Shi's. Even when it played with Xiaofan and Xiaohua, it was still very arrogant. How could it transform into a human like this? Did they recognize the wrong bird? Qin Shi also frowned, but he and the bright bird had a spiritual beast contract, so he definitely recognized it. Beautiful sister, it's beautiful sister. Xiaofan was the first to shout. Xiaohua snorted, muttered a few words in beast language, and turned its head. Mo Tiange saw Xiaofeng, who was smiling gently and enchanting a moment ago, suddenly had a fierce look in her eyes. She turned her head and waved her red sleeve. An overbearing vermilion bird's flame rushed out and swept Xiaohua 10 feet away. Xiaohua was dizzy from the fall. It turned its head and met Xiaofeng's eyes. It shivered and lowered its head. Xiaofeng smiled with satisfaction. The vermilion bird's flame reappeared and rolled Xiaohua back into her hand. She gently stroked Xiaohua's fur and said, "Be good, big sister will naturally treat you well, understand?" Xiaohua curled up in his arms and made a sound of grievance. Xiao Feng tossed Xiaohua aside and smiled charmingly again. "Greetings, master." Qin Shi cleared his throat and said, "Get ready. We're going out to cross the transformation tribulation." "Yes, master." Mo Tiange stared at Xiaofeng, who had subdued Xiaohua, and asked, "Why does Xiaofeng look like this?" Qin Shi shrugged and said, "How would I know? You are its master, and you don't know." Qin Shi said, "Xiaofeng isn't like Xiaofan and the others. Before it transformed, its spiritual intelligence wasn't high, so it didn't communicate much with me. Besides, I'm either in seclusion or outside. I often leave it in the Spirit Beast Institute, and the days we spend together can be counted on one hand." Although the bright bird was also a unique species from the distant past era, he only fed it ordinary spiritual beast pills and didn't have a place like the virtual sky world to raise it, so its spiritual intelligence was only ordinary. In addition, he didn't have much contact with them, so naturally, he didn't know. From this point of view, he really wasn't a qualified master. Of course, Mo Tiange wasn't qualified to criticize him. She herself was almost the same. It was just that she had the virtual sky world, so they spent more time together, and the medicinal pills she ate were of a higher level. Mo Tiange looked outside. Xiaofeng was playing with Xiaohua and Xiaofan. Although it was a bit fierce, it was very patient. She just didn't know whether it would submit or not. Thinking of this, a thought emerged in her mind. If Fei Fei came back, between it and Xiaofeng, who would subdue whom? She finished concocting medicinal pills and was refining some simple magic weapons to resist the heavenly tribulation. Mo Tiange was lost in thought for a while and suddenly said, "Do you think I can subdue the heavenly thunder?" She paused and looked up. "What do you mean?" She stretched out her hand and released a ball of golden thunder. "Look, isn't this also the heavenly tribulation thunder?" This ball of golden thunder was originally swallowed by the azure dragon shadow in the fan of heaven and earth. At that time, it was only a small ball, but after several years of nourishment, it doubled. More importantly, after refining this ball of golden thunder, she could cast thunder spells with ease, not to mention that the great heavenly thunder technique was originally a peerless cultivation technique. She pondered for a long time and slowly nodded. "I can try." Mo Tiange continued, "The problem is that I still can't master the azure dragon in the fan of heaven and earth, so I can't command it to swallow the heavenly thunder. What if you collect it yourself?" She asked. Mo Tiange thought for a while and said, "I can't bear the heavenly thunder by myself, unless it's weakened to a certain extent. Last time, the azure dragon could swallow the heavenly thunder. It was also because a lot of the heavenly thunder had been dispersed by them. Otherwise, the fan would have been destroyed and the azure dragon would have died instead of being swallowed." "That's easy, she said, "I'll disperse the heavenly thunder, then you can collect it." And, the two of them discussed for a while about how to collect the heavenly thunder. They had to pay special attention to one thing. If the power of the heavenly tribulation was comparable to the nascent soul heavenly tribulation last time, they could only prioritize saving their own lives and forget about collecting the heavenly thunder. However, this was unlikely. The reason why Mo Tiange had the nascent soul heavenly tribulation was because the cultivation technique she practiced was special, so her strength was far beyond that of ordinary cultivators. As for Little Phoenix, it had always been no different from ordinary spiritual beasts. It just absorbed a small amount of Shi's vermilion bird's breath when it advanced. In addition, this was the Eastern Sea, which was only a few thousand miles away from Bishuan Court. It was best to find a safe place first before going out to face the tribulation. After deciding, the two of them returned to the 10,000 miles canoe. After traveling east for several days, they finally found a secluded place and stopped. There was an island there with a circumference of several miles. There were no spirit veins and very few demonic beasts. She examined it carefully, then said, "Let's do it here. There aren't any high-level sea beasts nearby." Mo Tiange didn't have any objections. She pulled the 10,000 miles canoe ashore and the two of them went on the island. They put away the 10,000 miles canoe and started to prepare. She cleared all the dense vegetation on the island, leaving only bare ground. Then Mo Tiange started to lay a formation. She couldn't lay a great mountain protecting formation like the heaven and earth reversing formation. All great mountain protecting formations needed the support of spirit veins. Without spirit veins, there wouldn't be a great mountain protecting formation. However, she could lay a simplified version. Although its power wouldn't be as great as the original version, it would be much stronger than ordinary formations. Mo Tiange thought for a moment, then laid a defense formation in the center of the island. She then laid a yin-yang life-taking formation on the periphery, covering the whole island. Done. 2 days later, she stood up and clapped her hands. "Even if its power is similar to my nascent soul heavenly tribulation, it won't be a problem for us to survive." Shi, who was meditating next to her, opened his eyes. "Let's take a rest first. We'll call Little Phoenix out to face the tribulation later." Mo Tiange nodded. She meditated for a long time, slowly adjusting her breath until she returned to her peak state. Half a day later, she entered the virtual sky world and called the 3 spiritual beasts. Little Phoenix, come with us to face the tribulation. Xiaohua, Xiaofan, be good and stay here. Xiaohua's eyes widened. It grabbed her sleeve and cried. Mo Tiange patted its head and said, Little Phoenix's transformation tribulation isn't over yet, so it's time to go out and face the tribulation. You and Xiaofan's levels are too low, so it'll be dangerous if you go out. I'll let you go out and play after the heavenly tribulation is over, okay? Xiaohua whimpered and listlessly let go of her sleeve. Mo Tiange patted it a few times to comfort it, then took Little Phoenix out of the virtual sky world. As soon as she went out, she took out a puppet and threw it aside. She also threw a jade plate. The jade plate left her hand and floated in the air. Mo Tiange waved her spiritual aura, and the jade plate let out a buzzing sound. All the spiritual aura spots around the island seemed to have sensed it and shot out white lights. The white lights slowly gathered in the center and formed a shield. Stand in the middle, she said to Little Phoenix. Little Phoenix obeyed and stood in the middle, where the formation's power was the strongest. She threw several bottles of medicinal pills to it. If you're injured, take medicinal pills. Little Phoenix took the bottles, poured out all the medicinal pills and put them into its portable storage space. It then transformed back into its original form. After advancing to the 8th rank, Little Phoenix's body doubled in size. Its body was as bald as a chicken and was only covered with a thin layer of feathers, making it look a bit ugly. However, its tail feathers were as gorgeous as a phoenix's. The sky was clear and boundless a moment ago, but as soon as Little Phoenix came out, the dark clouds seemed to have sensed its power and gathered at a speed visible to the naked eye. In the blink of an eye, dark clouds covered the sky, lightning flashed, and thunder rumbled. The surroundings were dusky, and the wind whistled. If it was an ordinary demonic beast cultivator who cultivated to the transformation realm, they would have to go through countless tribulations and fights, and the possibility of passing the tribulation was very high. However, after Little Phoenix recognized its master, it was either in the spiritual beast pouch or in the spiritual beast yard. It didn't experience any fights at all. Letting it go through the tribulation by itself was simply courting death. After about 7 minutes, the pitch-black tribulation clouds finished gathering. The rumbling of thunder in the surroundings continued to ring, becoming louder and louder. Among the tribulation clouds, the heavenly thunder was brewing. Lightning flashed and thunder rumbled, causing the demonic beasts nearby to flee one after another. They had an innate intuition, so they knew danger was coming. However, their speed couldn't compare to the speed of the heavenly thunder. They had just swam for a while when the heavenly thunder fell from the tribulation clouds. Boom! The thick heavenly thunder fell, shining with white light, making the surroundings pale. Mo Tiange threw a red silk umbrella and flew above Little Phoenix. The heavenly thunder had already fallen. The red silk umbrella shook, and under the power of the heavenly thunder, it turned into smoke. This red silk umbrella was a spoil of war from a fight of magical powers. Its material was ordinary, and its power was also ordinary. Even if it was smashed into ashes by the heavenly thunder, it wouldn't feel distressed. The red silk umbrella blocked the heavenly thunder. When the heavenly thunder fell on the protective formation, its power was greatly reduced. Mo Tiange waved the heaven and earth fan and pulled it over. The second heavenly thunder fell, and its power was slightly stronger. Under Qin Shi's sword, it was split in half. Mo Tiange took a little of it and let Little Phoenix take the other half. With the protection of the defensive formation, Little Phoenix only swayed a little, but it still took a medicinal pill and stuffed it into its mouth. After the two heavenly thunder, the tribulation clouds surged, brewing the third heavenly thunder. Taking advantage of this gap, Qin Shi said, "Its power is much weaker than yours." They easily withstood the two heavenly thunder just now, which was about half the power of her nascent soul heavenly tribulation, they would definitely survive this heavenly tribulation. Sure enough, the third, the fourth. Every heavenly tribulation was weaker than hers, and its color only changed from white to blue. Only the last heavenly tribulation was purple. In fact, in general, the last heavenly tribulation for beast cultivators' transformation tribulation was purple. Golden lightning rarely appeared. It's finally over. After the ninth heavenly tribulation, Tiange breathed a sigh of relief. This heavenly tribulation was much better than hers, but her spiritual aura was still depleted. She fell to the ground and was about to meditate to recover her spiritual aura when she suddenly heard Little Phoenix shouting in surprise, "There's more. There's still a heavenly tribulation." Chapter 590. Qin Shi swallowed a medicinal pill. The three Yang real fire sword reformed and slashed at the heavenly thunder. Boom, boom, boom. The heavenly thunder was sent flying and exploded. Under the power of the heavenly thunder, the rocks on the island were broken, and the surrounding waves quickly swept the rocks away. In the blink of an eye, the island with a circumference of several kilometers was reduced to the area under their feet. There's a heavenly tribulation in the sea. Tiange looked up and saw that the tribulation clouds didn't disperse and were getting thicker. What's going on? Wasn't heavenly tribulation supposed to have 9 tribulations? After the 9th tribulation, the clouds should disperse. How could it? She didn't have time to think. The heavenly thunder among the tribulation clouds revealed its ferocious head and flashed faintly with golden light. Golden thunder. Tiange turned to look at Little Feng in the center of the formation. It was also shocked. Strange. Did Little Feng have something beyond its level? Otherwise, based on its regular cultivation experience, there was nothing special about it except for the vermilion bird's breath Qin Shi gave it. However, the vermilion bird's breath Qin Shi gave it was only a little bit, not enough to change its nature. She didn't have time to think. The golden thunder drew a golden border on the tribulation clouds. This golden border flashed faintly and became brighter and brighter. Tiange. Qin Shi's voice came to her ears. Puppet. Tiange nodded at him. The heavenly thunder finished brewing and finally struck down. Qin Shi flew into the air. The tens of thousands of sword lights of the three Yang real fire sword merged into one, forming a huge red sword of light that slashed at the golden heavenly thunder. The sound of the sword of light was covered by the thunder. The red light cleaved the heavenly thunder. Half of it corroded the heavenly thunder with the sword of light and finally dissipated, but the other half was still striking at Little Feng. Although it was also a heavenly tribulation of golden thunder, it was much less powerful than Tiange's nascent soul tribulation. This sword only consumed most of the vermilion bird's flame, not to the point where it lost all its spiritual aura. As soon as the sword of light dissipated, the puppet went to meet it, its white robe fluttering in the wind. This white robe was the Daoist robe of a high-level cultivator from Ice Palace. She didn't know what it was made of, but it was extremely flexible and had amazing defense. She also had a Daoist robe like this, which was of a higher level than the puppet's robe. After obtaining this Daoist robe, she didn't want to wear it. When she thought about how it was taken from a corpse, she felt disgusted. For this reason, Qin Shi deliberately put this Daoist robe back into the furnace and used the vermilion bird's flames to refine it. The golden lightning struck the puppet's body. Its white robe fluttered as if it had been plated with a layer of gold. The swift and fierce heavenly tribulation lightning instantly slowed down. Kacha! The puppet landed lightly on the ground. In the end, it was a heavenly tribulation. Qin Shi could scatter it, but the puppet couldn't bear it. However, with the puppet's interference, the lightning became much weaker. She didn't use the heaven and earth fan, but rather the Fuxing sword. She operated the great heavenly thunder spell, and the golden thunder on the Fushing sword flickered and spat out indeterminately as she faced the heavenly thunder. The moment it came into contact with the Fushing sword, the heavenly lightning seemed to be attracted to it. It pounced on the sword and stopped. She was stunned. The heavenly lightning continued to pour into the Fushing sword. Tiange clenched her teeth and firmly grasped the sword. Little Phoenix stared blankly at the center of the array. Its transformation heavenly tribulation seemed to have nothing to do with it. The number of lightning bolts on the Fushing sword increased until the entire sword turned into a ball of lightning. However, the lightning still didn't stop. The waves were monstrous and rushed towards them. Unfortunately, an array had already been set up here. When the waves crashed into the array, they only struggled for a moment before disappearing. The Fushing sword absorbed the thunder, and the 3 young real fire sword slashed horizontally. Only less than 1/10 of the heavenly thunder was left, and little Feng had to bear it. Even so, little Phoenix did not dare to be careless. With a clear cry, a bloody mist appeared around her, and her entire body was bathed in flames. These flames were not pure vermilion bird flames. However, the bright bird's bloodline was noble, and the vermilion bird's flames had been purified. Now, the level of these flames was extremely high, and they could even contend against the heavenly lightning. Little Feng did not dodge the lightning. The flames on her body burned even more intensely. The fire and lightning fought against each other, devouring each other and blending together. Tiange put away the Fushing sword and the puppet then looked at little Phoenix. Under the heavenly thunder, its flames were gradually extinguished and it was slowly engulfed by the lightning. Just as she was about to step forward, she blocked her and shook his head. "It's nothing." Amidst the lightning, the flames were faintly discernible, but they never went out. Little Feng finally fell. Outside the flames, lightning flashed. In the sky, the dark clouds suddenly disappeared, and the moon was clear. The heavenly tribulation came and went quickly. The tribulation clouds dispersed, and the huge waves subsided. They stood on this small island that was only about 100 feet in size, watching the ripples under the moonlight. For a moment, they felt like a lifetime had passed. The sound of waves came to their ears. Tiange turned to look at little Feng, who was surrounded by flames and lightning, and asked worriedly, "Is it okay?" "It's fine." With the spiritual beast contract, he could feel that little Feng's situation was very stable. It should be undergoing the heavenly thunder to temper its body. Tiange breathed a sigh of relief, sat cross-legged, and adjusted her breath. She didn't sit down. Although they were protected by the formation and the demonic beasts around them were scared away by the heavenly tribulation, the Eastern Sea was now the territory of the demonic cultivators in the South Sea. The heavenly tribulation's movement was not small, so it was better to be careful. The sound of the wind was particularly clear at night. He stood on the edge of the island. The waves rose and fell under his feet, glimmering under the moonlight. It was just nightfall, but it was completely dark. Places with pure scenery always seemed particularly small and lonely, such as the snowfield or the sea, especially when it was nighttime. Shi realized this, so he immediately calmed down and opened his eyes only when his mind was clear. He turned to look at little Feng, who was steadily absorbing the heavenly thunder to temper its body. Not far away, Tiange was sitting cross-legged with her eyes closed, her body shrouded in a misty white light. She was in the vast sea, surrounded by seawater, which made her feel like time and space were blurred. He listened to the sound of waves, felt the sound of the wind in his ears, and looked up at the boundless sea. There seemed to be a flash of light in the corner of his eyes, and he became vigilant. The 3 young real fire sword turned into a red light and rushed over there at lightning speed. When little Feng was undergoing the tribulation here, the demonic beasts either hid far away or died under the heavenly tribulation. Now that the heavenly tribulation was over, demonic beasts must be taking advantage of it. Demonic cultivators who had just undergone the heavenly tribulation were at their weakest. The red light flashed, and a powerful spiritual aura pressure suddenly burst out. The same red light turned into a circle and wrapped around the three young real fire sword, sending it back. She was stunned. This aura clearly belonged to an early-stage nascent soul human cultivator. That person was about to escape, but Shi shook his arm, and the three young real fire sword came out again. This time, it was full of power. The three young real fire sword arrived. Under the light of the vermilion bird's flames, a frightened face was reflected. Shi was surprised when he vaguely saw the person's appearance. He used his spiritual aura and withdrew the three young real fire sword. Mo Tiange finished adjusting her breath, opened her eyes, and stood up. She asked curiously, "What's going on?" She didn't answer. He looked at the place where the cultivator was hiding and said loudly, "Fairy Fengqin, please come and have a chat." That person didn't move for a long time, so she said again in a deep voice, "Fairy, we're fated to meet here. Why don't we meet calmly?" Under the moonlight, ripples appeared on the seashore. A person on a red lotus flew over. This person was Tiandao Sec's Fairy Fengqin. At this moment, the moonlight was cold, the seawater was rippling, her red clothes fluttered, and she stood on a red lotus. If it weren't for her gloomy expression, she would have looked as elegant as a fairy and picturesque. Upon arriving at this island, Fairy Fengqin saluted with a complicated expression. "Fellow Taoists, your spiritual beasts are crossing their tribulations here. Fengqin thought you were a demonic cultivator from the sea and wanted to take advantage of you. I'm really sorry for offending you." Her tone was polite, but her expression was still arrogant. She didn't care at all. He smiled and saluted back. "Fairy, you left a month ago. I thought you'd already returned to Tiandao sect, but I didn't expect to meet you here. We're really fated." Fairy Fengqin sensed the probing intention in his words, so she said faintly, "I won't hide it from you. Fengqin received some news before, so I came here to look for treasures." The three of them fell into a strange silence after Fairy Fengqin finished speaking. Now that the world was in chaos, Fairy Fengqin left Bishuan Court and should have returned to Tiandao sect long ago, but now she appeared in the depths of the Eastern Sea. They guessed she was probably looking for treasures or something, but they didn't expect she'd admit it so straightforwardly. As for Fairy Fengqin, her gaze was now wandering. She knew she couldn't hide it since they happened to meet here, so she admitted it. However, she was still worried, afraid these two people would take a share of the loot. She was only in the early stage of the nascent soul realm, so her cultivation level was ordinary. These two people were two of the most outstanding geniuses in the history of the celestial pole. She was on par with Mo Qingwei, but she couldn't defeat Qin Shoujing, who was in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. Seeing that the two of them were silent, Fairy Fengqin asked, "May I know why fellow Taoists are here?" "The demonic cultivators in the Eastern Sea are coming aggressively. Why aren't you two at Bishuan Court?" Qin Shi smiled bitterly. "Fairy, you don't know. The demonic cultivators have reinforcements. Now that Bishuan Court's great mountain protecting formation has been broken, we escaped." "Oh." Fairy Fengqin raised her eyebrows. "Both of you need to escape." The smile on Qin Shi's face became even more bitter. "That's almost 30 demonic cultivators, including 2 10th-ranked demonic cultivators." Fairy Fengqin was stunned. So many demonic cultivators were dispatched. "Yes, Fairy, if you don't want to go back to Kunwo for the time being, you'd better be careful. The Eastern Sea is now the territory of demonic cultivators." Fairy Fengqin pondered for a moment, then raised her hand to salute him. "Thank you for telling me, fellow Taoist. That being the case, I'll take my leave first. She took a step back. Fairy, please. Seeing that they didn't want to snatch her fated chance, Fairy Fengqing felt a bit relieved. She nodded at them, then a red lotus rose under her feet and she floated away from the island until she disappeared. She smiled disappeared. He stared at the place where Fairy Fengqing disappeared in silence for a long time before he said to Emotienga, "Let's follow her and take a look." Emotienga said, "You don't believe her." She shook his head. "I believe her, but only half of it. The treasure she's looking for might not be as calm as she appears." "All right." Emotienga thought for a moment. She came to the Eastern Sea because of Bichuan Court. The so-called treasure hunt is probably related to Bichuan Court, so I should take a look. She walked to the center of the island, took Little Feng into the virtual sky world, settled it in the spiritual beast house, and told Xiaohua and Xiaofan not to disturb it. "Let's go." She didn't have time to recover his spiritual aura, so he swallowed a restorative panacea then summoned his flying cloud. He concealed his aura then carefully followed behind Fairy Fengqing. Chapter 591. Under the moonlight, Fairy Fengqing flew anxiously for a while, constantly releasing her divine sense to observe the surroundings. After flying for a long time and finding nothing abnormal, she finally felt a little relieved. What she said to them just now was the truth. She didn't return to Tiandao's sect but stayed in the Eastern Sea to look for the treasure, but she concealed the specific information about the treasure. She was very glad that Qin Shoujing didn't get to the bottom of it. Otherwise, she really didn't know how to hide it. She couldn't lose this treasure. If she could really find it, it would be the biggest fated chance she had since she stepped on the path of immortality. After observing the surroundings, she waved her belt, creating a shield around her. The red lotus under her feet slowly descended, and she dived into the sea. The sun rose and the moon set. 2 days later, Fairy Fengqing came out of the water with a splash. She looked around vigilantly. After finding nothing abnormal, she stepped on her red lotus and disappeared into the sky. After she disappeared, the silhouettes of the two people slowly turned from blurry to clear. She looked in the direction Fairy Fengqing flew and said, "She's deliberately setting up a diversion." Emotienga frowned slightly. "Does she know we're following her?" "I don't think so," she said. Caution and suspicion are common characteristics of nascent soul cultivators. Fairy Fengqing has also been a nascent soul cultivator for many years, so it's not strange for her to do so. Emotienga paused and said, "Speaking of which, this Fairy Fengqing also advanced to the nascent soul realm when she was 300 years old, so she's only 700 years old now. She's very similar to Senior Martial Sister Miaoyi, but she doesn't seem to be as famous as Senior Martial Sister Miaoyi. Cultivators in the Celestial Pole rarely mention her." She said, "There's a reason for this. We all know that Tiandao's sect only accepts disciples based on their aptitude, regardless of their character. It's not a taboo for their disciples to practice devil arts, but many people who practice devil arts are very cruel, so Tiandao's sect has a lot of gossip. Although this fellow Daoist Fengqing's primary cultivation method isn't a devil cultivation method, she once cultivated some unorthodox cultivation method. As a result, her temperament is a bit strange. To put it nicely, she abhors evil, but to put it bluntly, she kills people like flies. Several hundred years ago, she often traveled outside. As long as she felt unhappy, she would always be merciless. The cultivators that died in her hands numbered in the hundreds, if not 1,000. Because of that, the cultivators of the Celestial Pole gave her the name Rakshasa. After learning about this, her temperament became even more irritable. If she heard someone talking about the female Rakshasa, she would definitely turn hostile and ruthless. From then on, no one dared to talk about her. As time passed, the matters of the past were also forgotten. After I formed my gold core, I didn't hear anything about her traveling outside. All these years she's been painstakingly cultivating inside the sect. Outsiders only know Fairy Finching's name, but they don't know the truth. Upon hearing that, Mo Tiange frowned and said, Master often said that on the path to the great Tao, one's disposition comes first. Why is it that I often see cultivators who don't cultivate their disposition? This Fengqing fairy was actually able to cultivate to the nascent soul stage. Qin Shi shook his head. You misunderstood. It's not that they don't cultivate their minds. What do you mean? Mo Tiange was confused. Qin Shi stared at her and asked, Do you remember Professor Han from Yunzhong? Professor Han was naturally Han Shizhi from Yu Mountain Academy. Mo Tiange nodded. I remember. Why are you talking about him? Qin Shi said, You should know that although Professor Han's cultivation level isn't obvious, he has a unique understanding of scriptures. He's only in the core formation realm, but he can become a professor precisely because he's unconventional and talented. He paused for a moment. When he saw Mo Tiange nod, he continued to say, In our opinion, he's ruthless and selfish. He doesn't restrain his desires and doesn't cultivate his disposition, but he can create his own mental cultivation technique. Do you know why? Mo Tiange said slowly, I've also thought about this question, but I haven't figured it out yet. Qin Shi smiled and said slowly, What I think is that he found his own Tao. Mo Tiange was stunned. She raised her head and stared at him. Since he can create his own mental cultivation technique, it means he already understands the scriptures and has his own understanding. Since he has his own understanding, but he doesn't practice the cultivation techniques of his predecessors, it's clear that he doesn't use the predecessors' Tao as his Tao. He found his own Tao. Mo Tiange listened and pondered silently. Over the past 100 years, she had traveled to many places and met many people, but none of them could make her as puzzled as Han Shizhi. As Qin Shi said, Han Shizhi was ruthless and stubborn. The so-called cultivation of disposition was nonsense to him. To put it bluntly, he wasn't a good person. However, such a bad person was a genius Confucian cultivator. He was only in the core formation realm, but he already became a professor at Yu Mountain Academy. He was highly regarded and even got the approval of the Confucian school's sacred object. It was only a matter of time before he advanced to the nascent soul realm. She couldn't understand why such a person's cultivation path was so smooth. Were the so-called state of mind and disposition all nonsense? Tao isn't the only Tao. Buddhism, Confucianism, Taoism, and Devil, each school has a different Tao. Even if you're a cultivator, each person's Tao is different, and each Tao has a chance to cultivate and become an immortal. This is the 3,000 great Taos, all of them can reach the divine. Mo Tiange nodded slowly. Of course she knew this. Qin Shi continued, There are 3,000 Taos. Similarity is Tao, opposites are Tao, justice is Tao, evil is Tao, salvation is Tao, slaughter is Tao, beauty is Tao, ugliness is Tao. Taos are ever-changing, but one thing remains the same, only a strong heart can find one's own Tao. In this world, there are some people who are ruthless and vicious. They don't practice devil arts, but they can walk to the end without any inner demons. Why is that? That was because they were vicious and ruthless at heart. They faced their hearts and firmly believed that what they thought was the truth, which was also their Tao. Since everything they do is following their own Tao, they naturally don't have inner demons. Therefore, people who are obsessed with their own Tao, whether they're good or evil, beautiful or ugly, can find their own Tao. Mo Tiange was stunned and murmured, In that case, people can set foot on the great Tao without cultivating their mental state at all. You can't think like that. Judging from her expression, she seemed to have doubts about mental state cultivation. Qin, she explained, every school has a different Tao. For example, devil cultivators don't need to cultivate their mental state, but would you envy them? Mo Tiange shook her head. Devil cultivators' Tao was indeed fast, but the probability of achieving the great Tao was much smaller. Most of them died from cultivation deviation. Tao cultivators' Tao, on the other hand, was a slow but steady path. There's no order in Tao, but there's a high and low level. Unorthodox Tao provokes a lot of karma. On the way to immortality, most people die. So, what's the use of Tao? This is the same as the difference between devil path and devil path. Mo Tiange didn't speak or move. Her eyes were fixed on the void. She never doubted her own Tao. Even if her devil art progressed rapidly, she still felt that the Tao she wanted to walk was upright. When she met Han Shi, she was puzzled. She didn't understand how such a person could be favored by heaven and smoothly reach the core formation realm or even the nascent soul realm. She thought maybe everyone was different, so the path to immortality was also different. However, she still had doubts in her heart. Could such a person really reach the end? But now, she was enlightened by Qin Shi. As long as others were persistent enough, they could also set foot on the great Tao. However, she didn't need to doubt her own Tao. As long as she walked steadily and firmly, one day, she would set foot on the supreme great Tao. When Qin Shi saw her raise her head and look resolute, he knew she'd thought it through. He smiled and said, "Let's quickly follow her. If we don't, she'll slip away." Mo Tiange nodded and returned a smile. The two of them rode their flight lights and chased after the place where Fairy Fengqing disappeared. Fairy Fengqing had been very cautious. She hid in the water for 2 days and wandered on the surface of the sea. Although this place was deep in the Eastern Sea, she was a nascent soul cultivator, so it was easy for her to deceive demonic beasts below the 8th rank. Mo Tiange and Qin Shi also followed behind her aimlessly. They were so leisurely because their task was completed and they could go back whenever they wanted. Secondly, Fairy Fengqing's strange behavior aroused their curiosity. If there were really treasures, they wouldn't rob her, but they could get a share of the loot. After wandering in the Eastern Sea for 3 days, Fairy Fengqing finally stopped on a small island. She summoned a thatched hut and entered it. Mo Tiange and Qin Shi found a place around the island, used peach branches to hide their tracks, and hid inside the 10,000 miles lone boat. There was no movement on the first day, and there was still no movement on the second day. Several days passed, but Fairy Fengqing never stepped out of the hut. They also felt the breath inside the hut was stable. She didn't leave quietly or do anything special. "What do you think she's doing?" Mo Tiange asked doubtfully inside the soundproof barrier. "Adjusting her breath. She hasn't done anything these past few days, so she's in good condition." "Cultivating. If that's the case, she's too free to hide in the uninhabited Eastern Sea to cultivate. Maybe she's studying some clues," Qin Shi said. "She probably got this information when she arrived at Bishuan Court. She probably can't understand it in such a short time. How long will this research take?" Mo Tiange had a headache. 3 to 5 days is fine, but what about a month or 2? In any case, we have nothing to do. We can wait even if it's a year or 2. Qin Shi was very calm. They'd already sent the disciples of the Immortal Alliance back to Kunwu, so they could go back any time. If they went back later, they could take fewer tasks. All right. Mo Tiange thought about it. It didn't matter if they didn't go back for the time being. Although they were a bit short on manpower, it wasn't to the point where they couldn't do without the two of them. Xianqing School's Great Mountain Protecting Formation was fully activated, so it was very safe. Her master and several senior martial brothers and sisters were also not in danger. Fairy Fengqing didn't move, but little Feng woke up first. After going through the transformation heavenly tribulation and being reshaped by heavenly thunder, the spiritual aura all over its body was condensed, and its spiritual aura pressure was heavy. The trace of vermilion bird's breath became purer and guarded its dantian. Qin Shi entered the virtual sky world to test his moves with it and was very satisfied. Now, little Feng's strength was equivalent to that of a nascent soul cultivator, so he could take it out to fight. In addition to himself, they also had a nascent soul puppet and an 8th rank bright bird. Even if they encountered a cultivator in the late nascent soul stage, they could still fight. Chapter 592. What's she waiting for? Mo Tiange sat cross-legged in the cultivation room, meditating with her eyes closed. She didn't understand Fairy Fengqing's temperament, but she knew the thoughts of nascent soul cultivators. Although they had a lifespan of 1,000 years, they yearned for immortality and didn't want to waste any time. Fairy Fengqing had led them in a big circle, so she must have probed enough. She must have a purpose for staying here. Was she waiting for someone? That shouldn't be the case. They were in the depths of the Eastern Sea, and the great war between humans and demons was still going on. Who would come to the depths of the Eastern Sea to meet her? Or was it a demonic cultivator? Or was she waiting for a fated chance? Outside the cultivation room, little Feng's voice came. Xiaohua and Xiaofan were playing. These two guys didn't know what to do and sometimes destroyed the bamboo forest or the medicinal field. Now that little Feng was here, little Feng would shout at them to stop. Among her 3 spiritual beasts, Xiaohua was naughty, Xiaofan was naive, and Feifei was arrogant. None of them could take care of the virtual sky world for her, so little Feng's appearance filled this gap. Little Feng was steady, polite, and strong. Whether it was Xiaohua or Xiaofan, they were all obedient to her. She was indeed the best choice to be the housekeeper. However, she didn't know who would subdue whom when Feifei came back. After thinking for a while, she shook her head and stood up to call little Feng. I'll leave this place to you. Little Feng's double pupils flashed with red light. Madam, are you going out? Yes. Little Feng bowed and said, Madam, I'll go with you. This is the Eastern Sea, where demonic cultivators run amok. I'll talk to them if I encounter them. Mo Tiange thought little Feng's words were reasonable, so she said, okay. After leaving the virtual sky world, Qin Shi was adjusting his breath in the 10,000 miles lone boat. He opened his eyes when he sensed their breaths. How is it? Mo Tiange asked while casting a spell to peep at Fairy Fengqing. Qin Shi said, still nothing. There was a breath-concealing formation set up in the cottage, so they could only sense Fairy Fengqing's breath. It was calm and stable, so she should be meditating. I don't think she's studying clues. If they were researching clues, they should have been hiding near Bishuan Court. If they hid here, it'd be troublesome if they attracted beast cultivators. Besides, it's been a while since she left Bishuan Court. She only found this place now, so she should have finished studying it by now. What you said makes sense. Qin Shi nodded. Mo Tiange continued to say, she found this place after some time and stayed here for almost 10 days. She still didn't seem to have any intention of leaving, so she must have been waiting for something. You're right, Qin Shi said while contemplating, there are only 3 things we need to wait for, a person, an object, or something. Mo Tiange answered, exactly. These were the 3 things she was waiting for. Whether it's a human or a demonic cultivator, something appears, or something happens. Qin Shi nodded then shook his head. Unfortunately, we're not familiar with this place. Otherwise, we'd be able to analyze some information. Yes. Mo Tiange shrugged. We still have no choice but to wait. The two of them were silent for a moment. Suddenly, a voice came from behind. Master, Madam, why don't we let Xiaofeng test it out? The two of them turned around and saw Xiaofeng wearing a smile on her face. She looked quite confident, so Qin asked, how are we going to test her? Xiaofeng said, I'll pretend to be a demonic cultivator from the Eastern Sea and talk to her. Mo Tiange's eyes brightened. Yes, why didn't I think of that? She then frowned and asked, she saw you when you were going through your tribulation. Will she recognize you? Xiaofeng was full of confidence. No. My aura is very different after I go through my tribulation. If I don't show my true form, she won't recognize me. Qin agreed. That's a good idea. Then Xiaofeng will go. Qin nodded. You have to be careful. Fairy Fengqing has advanced to the nascent soul realm for hundreds of years. You're not her match. Yes, Xiaofeng understands. Xiaofeng quietly got off the 10,000 miles lone boat and flew thousands of miles away before she showed her figure and flew towards this place. The powerful aura of an 8th-ranked demonic cultivator appeared. Fairy Fengqing, who was in the thatched cottage, finally couldn't sit still. The curtain was lifted, and she looked to the east with a worried expression. Before long, Xiaofeng rode a red cloud and floated to this small island. She stared at Fairy Fengqing fiercely. Who are you? Why did you come to the Eastern Sea? One was in the 8th rank, and the other was in the early stage of the nascent soul realm. Their strength was about the same, but this was the Eastern Sea. As a demonic cultivator, Xiaofeng could be a bit stronger. Fairy Fengqing sighed inwardly when she saw that Xiaofeng easily discovered her existence. Her breath-concealing technique wasn't very good. She could deal with low-rank demonic beasts, but it was hard to hide from demonic cultivators above the 8th rank. In an instant, countless thoughts flashed through Fairy Fengqing's mind. In the end, she cupped her hands and politely said, Fellow Daoist, I'm a cultivator from Kunwu. My Daoist name is Miaoyi. I came to the Eastern Sea to look for fated chances. Xiaofeng was slightly stunned, then she looked angry. Come here to look for fated chances. Do you want to kill demonic cultivators in the Eastern Sea? Fairy Fengqing said faintly, the human race and the demon race have always been enemies. Now is the time of war, so why should I take the risk to come here to kill demonic cultivators? That's hard to say. Xiaofeng sneered. Maybe you never thought you'd run into demonic cultivators here. After all, this place isn't the deepest part of the Eastern Sea. Fairy Fengqing's eyes flashed and she said, You're looking for trouble on purpose, aren't you? You can ask the sea clans nearby whether I killed demonic cultivators or not, but you're presumptuously guessing my thoughts and trying to pin a crime on me. So what if I did? Hostility appeared on Xiaofeng's face. A gorgeous fiery red feather appeared in her palm. With a flick of her finger, the feather suddenly grew bigger and floated in the air. The human race and the demon race have always been enemies. Even if you didn't go deep into the Eastern Sea to kill demonic cultivators, you went there to look for treasures. The Eastern Sea is the territory of us demonic cultivators. How can you come and go so easily? After a demonic cultivator transformed, he would refine a part of his body into a magic weapon, which was equivalent to a cultivator's natal magic weapon. Xiaofeng's natal magic weapon was its feather. This feather gathered all the vermilion bird's breath on its body and was tempered by heavenly thunder, so its power was extraordinary. Fairy Fengqing's expression changed slightly. She didn't expect this demonic cultivator to fight without any hesitation. She wasn't afraid of fighting with it, but its magic weapon didn't look weak. If they fought, it might attract more powerful demonic cultivators. After pondering for a while, she cupped her hands and said, Fellow Daoist, you're too impatient. We're not low-level cultivators. What's the point of fighting? Xiaofeng remained calm and collected. What are you trying to say? Fairy Fengqing said, humans and demons are different, but fated chances aren't. Xiaofeng looked at her suspiciously. Are you still willing to give up your fated chance? Fairy Fengqing said, of course not. The fated chance of human cultivators might not be useful to demonic cultivators. However, I can tell you something. For demonic cultivators, it's also a fated chance. Xiaofeng sneered. I don't dare to believe a human cultivator's words. Then, she waved her hand, and the tail feather floating in the air shone brightly. It was wrapped in a ball of flame, and it stabbed toward Fairy Fengqing. Fairy Fengqing was shocked. With her nascent soul cultivation, she wasn't afraid of Xiaofeng. She was shocked by the aura emitted by Xiaofeng's natal magic weapon. This phoenix feather was condensed with the pure breath of the vermilion bird. After the heavenly tribulation, Xiaofeng told them that the reason why there was a 10th tribulation for its transformation was that its bloodline had changed. The bright bird was originally a descendant of the phoenix, and it was of the same race as the vermilion bird. However, after breeding for so long, the bloodline of the phoenix had become very faint. When it transformed, the breath of the vermilion bird purified its bloodline, making it a real divine beast. Divine beasts shouldn't exist in this world. As one of the 5 spirits, the divine beast vermilion bird had a vast and sacred aura that was comparable to that of a fairy. In this day and age when the immemorial cultivation techniques were lost, the appearance of a divine beast broke the balance of the current realm of cultivators. It triggered the law of heaven and earth, and thus caused the 10th tribulation. At this moment, Fairy Fengqing was even more shocked when she sensed the phoenix feather's aura. This demonic cultivator's cultivation was slightly lower than hers, but its aura was so powerful, and it was so sacred that she wanted to worship it. What was going on? Could it be that there was a descendant of a divine beast hidden in the depths of the East Sea? This kind of aura wasn't something that those so-called descendants who had a minuscule amount of divine beast bloodline could possess. As she thought about this, the phoenix feather arrived in front of her in the blink of an eye, shining with an extremely bright light. Outside, Little Feng and Fairy Fengqing were fighting fiercely. Inside the 10,000-li lone boat, Mo Tiange asked Qin Shi, what does she mean? Why didn't she tell us her real name? Qin Shi said, she's probably looking for a very big fated chance, so she doesn't want people to know her real name. Otherwise, once it gets out, her situation will be very worrying. But she told us Senior Marshal Sister Miaoi's name. Mo Tiange said angrily, looking very displeased. Qin Shi shook his head helplessly. This Fairy Fengqing is about the same age as Senior Marshal Sister Miaoi, but Senior Marshal Sister Miaoi's aptitude is outstanding, she's popular, and her realm advancement is much faster than Senior Marshal Sister Miaoi's. In the past, Fairy Fengqing didn't seem to care, but now, I'm afraid she has resentment in her heart. If she didn't want to leave her name, she could have used an alias like Mo Tiange, but Fairy Fengqing didn't. She deliberately told them Lord Daoist Miaoi's name. They wouldn't believe it if they said it was unintentional. Outside the longhouse, Little Feng and Fairy Fengqing were fighting back and forth. The spiritual aura was turbulent, causing raging waves and surging clouds. Fairy Fengqing cultivated the fire lotus technique, while Little Feng was a divine beast with fire attributes. The two of them fought on the sea, so their strength was weakened. Although Fairy Fengqing's methods were brilliant, Little Feng's vermilion bird flame was of a higher level, so she couldn't do anything to it for a while. However, the commotion here had already caused the sea beasts to hide. If this dragged on for a while, higher-level beast cultivators would probably come. While Fairy Fengqing was thinking about this, Red Lotus blocked the phoenix feather and shouted, "Fellow Daoist, it's not easy for the beast race to cultivate. Do you really want to hurt both of us? Little Feng's figure came to a halt. Fairy Fengqing took the opportunity to say, "Fellow Daoist, you must have advanced to the 8th rank not long ago, right? Although our realms are the same, our strengths are different. If I make up my mind, it won't be difficult for me to injure you." Hearing those words, Xiao Feng revealed a hesitant expression. "Although we're not from the same clan, we don't have any deep hatred. Why do we have to fight to the death?" After a while, Little Feng finally waved her hand and took back her phoenix feather. Fairy Fengqing heaved a sigh of relief and also called back her red lotus. "How should I address you, fellow Daoist?" Fairy Fengqing asked. Little Feng said, "I'm a descendant of the phoenix. You can call me Lord Phoenix." "Fellow Daoist Lord Phoenix." Fairy Fengqing felt strange. Her name was Fengqing, but this beast cultivator called her Lord Phoenix. Why did it sound like he was taking advantage of her? Little Feng cast a sidelong glance at her. "Fellow Daoist, although I'm not strong enough to fight with you, it won't be difficult for me to escape. As for you, if you're besieged by beast cultivators, not only will your plan be in vain, but you'll also lose your life if you're not careful." It put on a fake smile. "Do the benefits you just mentioned still count?" Fengqing felt helpless and said, "Of course." Chapter 593. Fairy Fengqing waved her hand and laid down a soundproof enchantment. She said solemnly, "Fellow Daoist Phoenix Lord, the information I'm telling you might be a great opportunity for you demon cultivators. You must sign a contract with me and you cannot go back on your word." A heart demon oath was useless to Yao cultivators. Between humans and Yao, a relationship could only be established through a contract, such as a master recognition contract or a subordinate contract. Xiao Feng replied without hesitation, "Sure, but you must swear not to deceive me." Fairy Fengqing paused and quickly said, "Of course." The human and the demon cautiously swore an oath and signed a contract. Fairy Fengqing was in a passive position, so she took the initiative to make a heart demon oath. "I, Xianqing School's cultivator Miaoyi, swear by my heart demon that as long as fellow Daoist Phoenix Lord abides by her promise, I'll tell her about a fated chance or treasure without any deception. If I violate this oath, my cultivation will no longer be able to advance. I will be haunted by my inner demons, and I will die." Fairy Fengqing then looked at Xiaofeng. "Fellow Daoist, I've already made a heart demon oath. What about you?" The corner of Xiaofeng's mouth twitched secretly, but she did not reveal anything on her face. She said lightly, "Let's sign the contract now." As it finished speaking, its body lit up with a red light. Within the light, there seemed to be some mysterious runes appearing one by one. Finally, everything calmed down, and the runes turned into a small ball of light that floated in the air. Little Feng looked at Fengqing and said calmly, "Fellow Daoist Miaoyi, leave your divine sense imprint on it, and it will be considered a success." Fairy Fengqing carefully extended her divine sense and touched the ball of light. After confirming that the contents were correct, she left an imprint and retracted it. The ball of light lit up, which meant that the contract had taken effect. Little Phoenix waved its sleeves, and the ball of light flew back to it. It turned into a clear light and returned to its body. "Fellow Daoist, please speak." Fairy Fengqing's eyes flickered, and she said in a low voice, "Since fellow Daoist Phoenix is a demon cultivator of East Sea, do you know anything unusual about this place?" Xiaofeng's expression did not change. She shook her head and said, "I'm not a monster cultivator from the Eastern Sea, and this is not the location of my Immortal's cave, so I don't know." Fairy Fengqing didn't suspect anything. She paused for a moment and began to slowly explain the reason. It all started from a month ago. The beast cultivators invaded and the Eastern Sea region was in a state of emergency. Bishuan Court lost a lot of disciples, but in the end, they barely managed to block the beast cultivators with the power of the Great Mountain Protecting Formation. They then went to Tiandao's sect to ask for help. At that time, Tiandao's sect only had 2 nascent soul cultivators. Lu Dequan was in charge of Tiandao's sect's Great Mountain Protecting Formation, so Fairy Fengqing went to the Eastern Sea to guard Bishuan Court and block the breach in the sect's defense created by the beast cultivators. After Fairy Fengqing arrived at Bishuan Court, she managed to stabilize the situation very quickly. Fairy Fengqing was a nascent soul cultivator, so Bishuan Court, whose highest cultivation level was only in the core formation realm, didn't dare to slight her in the slightest. Aside from the 7th floor of the Dao Achieving Pagoda, all of Bishuan Court's important places were open to Fairy Fengqing. Tang Shen even offered her a bunch of valuable gifts to thank her for her help. In this batch of gifts, Fairy Fengqing found an item, a gray transparent stone. This stone didn't have any spiritual energy, but it had a mysterious calming power that could stabilize one's mind. There were many methods to calm one's mind in the cultivation world, such as formations, talismans, and medicinal pills. All of them had finished products that could calm one's mind. Some people even refined magic weapons, magic tools, and so on that could calm one's mind. These things naturally weren't as important as things used in fights of magical power, but they were still indispensable. Most people had 1 or 2 of them. Treasures that naturally calmed one's mind were mostly made of special materials, so they contained natural formations. These kinds of formations might have been discovered or hadn't been discovered yet. If they hadn't been discovered yet, they were incomparably valuable. Among the various kinds of naturally calming treasures circulating in the market, most of them had already been thoroughly studied, so their value was average. This stone Bishuan Court offered was the latter type. Fairy Fengqing discovered that this object was made of a special material. Even with her knowledge as a nascent soul cultivator, she couldn't recognize it. It contained a mysterious natural formation that was complex and exquisite. It seemed to contain some kind of wonderful sacred aura. She knew she'd encountered a real treasure. If this object was returned to the sect and the sect's formation master extracted its formation, it would be of great benefit to the sect. She never expected that this small Bishuan Court, which couldn't even be considered a medium-sized cultivation group in Kunwu, would actually have such a treasure. It seemed the Eastern Sea wasn't as barren as Kunwu cultivators thought. Fairy Fengqing asked about this object's origin, but no one in Bishuan Court knew about it. It was Dreamy who found a record for her. This object belonged to the 10th generation head elder of Bishuan Court. After the elder passed away, he offered all his possessions to the sect, so this object became a collection in the sect's storeroom. Fairy Fengqing obtained the letter from the 10th generation head elder from Dreamy and found some vague records in it. When the 10th generation head elder was young, in order to find a fated chance to form her gold core, he went deep into the Eastern Sea to look for beast cores that could help him form his gold core. She searched the Eastern Sea for more than half a year and encountered countless dangers. Along the way, she once found an abnormality in a sea area and picked up this gray stone. After that, she only used it to calm her mind when she cultivated and didn't pay much attention to it. However, Fairy Fengqing found something that moved her in the few sentences about the abnormalities recorded in the book. On the surface of the sea on the side of the island, there was a faint glow. I followed the light and went to the bottom of the sea. I saw a gray stone hidden in a rock with a faint glow. The head elder put the object away and examined it carefully. She found something strange about the surroundings. There seemed to be faint spiritual aura fluctuations. After searching for a long time, she found several damaged magic weapons. Fairy Fengqing said, "This person's cultivation level is low and her knowledge is shallow." As soon as I saw those damaged magic weapons, I knew they were left by a deification cultivator, but she thought they were left by a predecessor of the sect. Xiaofeng looked indifferent. "What does that have to do with me?" What use are human cultivators' belongings to us beast cultivators? Fairy Fengqing stretched out her hand, holding a gray, slightly transparent stone between her fingers. If I say this object is Qilin bone, will you believe me? Xiaofeng was shocked. What did you say? Fairy Fengqing played with the stone in her hand and cast a sidelong glance at Xiaofeng. In Kunwu, there's a spiritual beast sect that specializes in beast taming techniques. The mount of their founder is said to be a Qilin. Xiaofeng said without hesitation, that's impossible. Divine beasts have long disappeared. At most, it's a spiritual beast with Qilin blood, just like me. Probably. Fairy Fengqing didn't want to argue with her and continued to say, after tens of thousands of years, even if beast cultivators have a long lifespan, that Qilin should have passed away. After it passed away, spiritual beast sect refined its bones into a magic weapon called the Qilin Cauldron. I was fortunate enough to see it. Previously, I always felt its aura was familiar, but later, I remembered it was very similar to the Qilin Cauldron's aura, and it was a bit purer. Xiaofeng's eyes flashed. Could it be that you're willing to give this Qilin bone as a gift? Fairy Fengqing shook her head. Of course not. I told you, it's a piece of news. She continued to say, during those days, I looked through Bishuan Court's ancient records and inquired about some legends about the Eastern Sea. Basically, I'm sure a Qilin once appeared in the sea. Xiaofeng frowned. Are you sure it was a real Qilin and not just a spiritual beast with the shape of a Qilin but a thin bloodline? Fairy Fengqing said, it's just my speculation. Xiaofeng was silent, but her thoughts were flying. Did a Qilin really appear here? Did this Qilin leave behind a bloodline? If divine beasts still existed in this world, after a long time, she said, fellow Daoist, although this piece of news is shocking, it doesn't have much value. The Eastern Sea is so big, where can we find it? Fairy Fengqing said, how could it not have any value? You're a beast cultivator, so you can inquire about this from the sea beasts here. Moreover, why did this Qilin bone appear here, and why is there a beast cultivator's magic weapon nearby? It's most likely a cultivator fought with a Qilin here, and that Qilin was injured. Xiaofeng couldn't help but feel tempted. If a deification cultivator fought with a Qilin here, that Qilin most likely died here, fellow Daoist Phoenix Master, is this piece of news valuable? Fairy Fengqing saw that she was moved, so she smiled and asked. Xiaofeng collected her thoughts and said seriously, if that's the case, then it's still valuable. But it raised its eyebrows and said, what value does it have to you? If you want a Qilin, then we're opponents. Fairy Fengqing said indifferently, I'm naturally more interested in deification cultivators. A Qilin might have died here, and so might a deification cultivator. If we can obtain a deification cultivator's relic, it'll be a great opportunity for us nascent soul cultivators. If that's the case, why didn't you go look for it, but stayed here instead? Fairy Fengqing explained that cultivator's note said that we can only reach the place she mentioned at a special time. All right. Xiaofeng pondered for a moment. I'll believe you for now. Fairy Fengqing smiled. Since Xiaofeng was willing to believe her, she wasn't afraid that it would leak the news. That was a Qilin, who would want to share the opportunity with other beast cultivators? Moreover, they had made a contract between them. The human and the beast smiled and said their goodbyes with different thoughts. An hour later, Xiaofeng came back after circling around the place. Master, Madam, Xiaofeng reported respectfully. Fortunately, Xiaofeng didn't fail you. It told Qin Shi about the information it had obtained. In the end, it asked Qin Shi, Master, please erase that contract. Spiritual beasts had a master, which was different from masterless demonic beasts. With a subordinate contract, other contracts were much less effective. Qin was its master, so he could erase any contract that conflicted with it. After erasing the contract, Qin said, Xiaofeng's contract can be erased. Fairy Fengqing also made an oath in Senior Martial Sister Miaoyi's name, so any contract or heart demon oath they made would be in vain. Mo Tiange smiled and said, Xiaofeng didn't tell the truth. How much of Fengqing's words are true? Qin said, the hardest thing to distinguish between lies and lies is that they're half true. In my opinion, the background of what Fengqing said is mostly true, but the details are false. Mo Tiange was confused. You mean, there might be a Qilin, but it's not like what Fengqing said. Probably. Once Fairy Fengqing returned to the house, Qin said, at least we know why she stayed here. Chapter 594. A Qilin once appeared in the East Sea and fought against a deification cultivator. Several damaged magic weapons and a piece of Qilin bone were found at the bottom of the sea as proof of that battle. Whether what Fairy Fengqing said was true or not, there must be something to gain from it. That was why she risked being discovered by the beast cultivators and went deep into the East Sea. If it was really a Qilin, it was a temptation they couldn't resist. Over the years, they encountered the Azure Dragon, Vermilion Bird, and White Tiger temples. The power of these three spirits was obtained by Qin Shi, Mo Tiange, and Fei Fei respectively. They also knew the location of the Black Tortoise Temple. The only thing they lacked was the Qilin. Mo Tiange had a hunch that gathering the power of the five spirits would be a great harvest. They originally planned to go to the Black Tortoise Temple to look for clues about the Qilin. Now that they heard this news, they naturally couldn't let it go. After discussing with Qin Shi, they agreed that they would continue to monitor Fairy Fengqing while Little Phoenix would go to inquire about the information. There were demonic beasts all around. They couldn't communicate with them, but Little Phoenix could. Little Phoenix gladly obeyed. It took the magic weapon Qin Shi gave it, hid its traces, and quietly left the canoe. After flying thousands of miles away from the range of Fairy Fengqing's divine sense, Little Phoenix stopped in midair and scanned the area with its divine sense. It confirmed that there were many sea beasts around, including several 6th or 7th rank ones. It shook its body and showed its true form. After being tempered by the heavenly thunder and completely absorbing the vermilion bird's breath, Little Phoenix's appearance changed. Gorgeous feathers grew out of its bare body. The fiery red light was the purest color of flames. There were countless tiny flames burning on its feathers, making it look like a phoenix made of flames. Little Phoenix raised its head and let out a phoenix cry, spreading in all directions with endless power. Whoosh, whoosh. Along with Little Phoenix's cry, waves appeared on the calm sea. Many sea beasts panicked at first, then gathered together, and finally swam upstream one after another, popping their heads out of the sea. Seeing Little Phoenix, they were first shocked, then horrified, and finally worshipped it. For demonic beasts, bloodline was their most essential characteristic. There were differences between demonic beasts with high and low cultivation levels, and there were even more differences between demonic beasts with low and noble bloodlines. Noble bloodlines meant a high starting point, fast progress, superior aptitude, and early spiritual wisdom. It was very difficult for a small fish with the lowest bloodline to become a demonic beast, but the noblest 5 spirits were born with 5th or 6th rank cultivation levels. Worship of bloodlines was deeply engraved in demonic beasts' blood. Even if their cultivation levels were higher, they wouldn't dare to fight against low-level demonic beasts with noble bloodlines. But now, a phoenix had appeared in front of these sea beasts whose bloodline was neither too low nor too high. Its beautiful figure, pure aura, and powerful aura all brought them a deep shock. The level 6 killer whale unconsciously let go of the jellyfish, and the bloody jellyfish fell from its mouth, falling into the sea. Dragon, Yang Sea. Killer whale of the Sioux, brother tiger, a giant clam floated towards it. What is this? Mythological beast. This is a mythological beast. A seal raised its head and roared in beast language, attracting several 6th and 7th rank sea beasts to swim towards it. Dragon. Is. Phoenix dragon. Such a powerful aura. If it's not a divine beast, then what is it? The seal was convinced. It swam forward and bowed its huge head to Xiaofeng. Honorable divine monarch, leopard star of the seal clan greets you. Xiaofeng lowered her gaze and proudly nodded her head, but she did not even make a sound. At such a close distance, the seal felt an even greater pressure. It hadn't reached the 8th rank yet, so its spiritual intelligence wasn't high. Moreover, as a demonic beast, it relied on its instincts to act. It already believed without a doubt that Xiaofeng was a genuine mythological beast. My lord. Under the pressure, Seal braced himself and said, ever since the world changed, the divine lords have all ascended to the spiritual realm. Did my lord descend from the spiritual realm? Xiaofeng snorted softly and said, I am the descendant of the divine monarch, and I have stayed in the human world. Ah. The seal recalled that not long ago, when the world changed, the East Sea and the South Sea were connected. Then, wasn't the South Sea's monarch the Qilin clan? Although the divine beasts had long passed away, those descendants with impure bloodlines did not have the qualifications to ascend to the spiritual realm. They could only stay in the human world. Unless one day, they broke through the shackles of their bloodline and were reborn, only then would they have the possibility of ascending to the spiritual realm. However, after millions of years, the bloodline of the divine beasts had become thinner and thinner. It was difficult for these descendants of the divine beasts to even maintain the appearance of the divine beasts, let alone purify their bloodline and become true divine beasts. Thinking of this, the seal admired this divine monarch even more. Under such circumstances, he could actually cultivate the pure aura of a divine beast and evolve his bloodline into a true divine beast. This divine monarch was really amazing. The seal was in awe and said respectfully, my lord is truly a role model for my Yao clan. Leopard Star admires you greatly. Why did you come here? If you have any instructions, Leopard Star will die 10,000 times. A hint of a smile appeared in Xiaofeng's eyes. She said, you're a smart one. The seal put its short forelimbs together and made a saluting gesture. Sir Divine Monarch is from the Phoenix clan, which is very different from my water clan. You must have come to my eastern sea for something important. Leopard Star understands. Xiaofeng was very satisfied. She said, if that's the case, help me do something. If it's done, you won't be lacking in benefits. Yes. The seal readily agreed. Please instruct me, my lord. Xiaofeng said, about 3,000 miles east of here, there's a small island. Do you know if there's anything unusual around the small island? Small island? The seal thought for a while and asked, what kind of unusual do you mean, my lord? Xiaofeng said, on certain days, there will be unusual phenomena, or perhaps, strange things will appear. She paused and continued, by the way, ask around if there are any legends nearby. The older the better, the more magical the better. Yes. The seal plucked up her courage and said, my lord, this will take some time. Why don't you come to my cave and rest for a few days? Xiaofeng said lightly, I'm a phoenix of the fire clan. I can't be compatible with your water clan, so I won't enter the sea. Once you're done, just come here directly. Leopard Star obeys. The seal accepted the order and left. The surrounding sea beasts who let go of the opportunity because of hesitation were wringing their hands. Whether this person was a real divine monarch or not, his 8th rank cultivation base and the aura of a divine beast were not fake. Even if water and fire couldn't be compatible, if he leaked some benefits, it would be a great opportunity for them. Sigh, they let Leopard Star take advantage of them for nothing. These sea beasts were reluctant, but they didn't dare to offend him, so they lingered around and didn't leave. Xiao Feng swept her gaze and said in a deep voice, "You juniors, there's no need to linger here. If you have any news about what I just said, you can also come here." The sea beasts were overjoyed. A bold one swam forward and timidly said, "Sir Divine Monarch, this little beast has something to say." Under the pressure of the divine beast, it only took 2 days for Xiao Feng to inquire about a lot of news. She eliminated the useless ones and recorded the ones that might be relevant. Then, she planned to go back. Unexpectedly, when she was about to leave, she suddenly felt a few powerful auras flying towards her. 8th rank and above monster cultivators. Xiao Feng's heart skipped a beat. She felt that there were 10th rank monster cultivators among these auras. She wasn't an ordinary monster cultivator, but a cultivator's spiritual beast. In a situation where humans and monsters couldn't coexist, it was really unwise to appear in front of other monster cultivators. But it was too late to escape now. The highest cultivation base of the monster cultivators flying towards her was 10th rank. She was just 8th rank, so she definitely couldn't escape. Hide her aura. That wouldn't work either. She had already been seen by these sea beasts. Under the suppression of her cultivation base, she couldn't hide from the 10th rank monster cultivators. Those auras were getting closer and flying towards her. Xiao Feng made up her mind and made a decision. Since she couldn't escape, she might as well face them directly to avoid bringing trouble to her master. With that thought in mind, Xiao Feng shook her body and put away the flames all over her body. She turned into a human and stepped on a burning phoenix feather, waiting for the arrival of those monster cultivators. Soon, a conveyance light appeared in the sky. It was mostly blue and white, accompanied by a powerful aura, and instantly appeared in front of her. Xiao Feng looked up, and the conveyance light dissipated, revealing the true appearance of several monster cultivators. The leading monster cultivator was 8th rank monster cultivator. He wore a blue robe and looked to be in his late 20s. He had a handsome face and an arrogant expression. Behind the blue-robed monster cultivator stood 6 monster cultivators of different appearances. There were 2 10th rank monster cultivators, 3 9th rank monster cultivators, and 1 8th rank monster cultivator. Xiao Feng keenly sensed that the blue-robed monster cultivator had a pure and deep aura of water and earth. Its grade was extremely high. Although it couldn't compare to her vermilion bird aura, it was equally vast and boundless. Xiao Feng was surprised. Could this person also be a descendant of an ancient divine beast? The blue-robed monster cultivator's gaze fell on Xiao Feng, and his eyes flashed with amazement. Xiao Feng's human form was indeed beautiful, but what was more unique was her mysterious double pupils and the aura that seemed to be burning all over her body. She was a descendant of a divine beast. After a moment of surprise, the blue-robed monster cultivator raised his hand and said politely, "Greetings, fellow Daoist." After Xiao Feng returned the greeting, he asked, "Fellow Daoist, you should be a fire attribute monster cultivator. Why did you come to the South Sea?" Xiao Feng blinked her eyes and said, "South Sea. Isn't this the East Sea?" The blue-robed monster cultivator paused for a moment then smiled. What fellow Daoist said isn't wrong. Not long ago, the world changed, and the East Sea and the South Sea were connected, so this place is both the South Sea and the East Sea. I see. Xiao Feng looked like she suddenly understood. No wonder I felt strange coming to the East Sea this time. She paused for a moment then looked worried. Oh no, don't tell me, the blue-robed monster cultivator hurriedly asked, "Fellow Daoist, why did you come here?" Perhaps I can be of help. Seeing that Xiao Feng was looking at him hesitantly, he raised his hand and said with a smile, I'm Xuanri from the Qilin clan. My father is the South Sea sovereign. Xiao Feng's heart skipped a beat. Xianyue monster monarch, who besieged Bishuan court, was the South Sea's second prince. This person's name was Xuanri, and he was also the son of the South Sea sovereign. Could he be the eldest prince? For a moment, countless thoughts flashed through her mind, but her expression did not change. So it's the Black Sun Monster Lord. I'm from the Phoenix race, and my title is Lord Phoenix. Fellow Taoists can just call me Xiao Feng. The monster cultivators were shocked to hear that, and the Black Sun Monster Lord took a long time to come back to his senses. He smiled extremely warmly. So it's fellow Taoist Xiao Feng. No wonder your divine beast aura is so pure. When I saw you just now, I thought you were a divine beast. He was much more sensitive than these low-level sea beasts. Although Xiao Feng's vermilion bird aura was pure, her aura was not strong enough. If she was a real divine beast, even if she was just at the 8th rank, her superior divine beast aura was enough to make the monster cultivators worship her. Xiao Feng's aura was very pure, but her aura was not much different from her father's. She should be cultivated and not a natural divine beast. Thinking of this, the Black Sun Monster Lord's heart moved. Could this fellow Taoist from the Phoenix race have some secret technique to purify her bloodline? Chapter 595. After Xiaofeng left, Mo Tiange and Qin Shi waited for 5 or 6 days, but they didn't see her return. The two of them were very worried. Although Xiao Feng was quick-witted and steady, she did not have much worldly experience. Moreover, she had just transformed into human form not too long ago. If she encountered any danger, it would be hard to say. The only thing he could be sure of was that the spiritual beast contract still existed, and little Feng's life was not in danger. Where did he go? Qin Shi frowned. There were no beast cultivators in the 8th rank or higher in the vicinity. Little Feng only went to inquire about the situation and would be back in a few days, so there shouldn't be any danger. But there was no news of Xiao Feng, not a single trace of her could be found in the surroundings. Don't worry, Mo Tiange comforted her. Xiao Feng's very smart. She probably encountered some kind of problem. Xiao Feng had indeed encountered a difficult problem. She accidentally bumped into Mystic Sun Demon Lord and the others. To avoid implicating her master, she could only follow them. These demonic cultivators had come here for a certain reason, and they wouldn't be leaving anytime soon. She had to find a way to inform her master, Miss Feng, Miss Feng. It had only been a few days, but the way he addressed her had changed from fellow Taoist Feng to Miss Feng. Xiao Feng came back to her senses and smiled apologetically at Black Sun Demon Lord. Sorry, I was distracted. No matter. The Black Sun Demon Lord's eyes hid a trace of eagerness. Is there something that Miss is worried about? Xiao Feng shook her head. Nothing. Nevertheless, Black Sun Demon Monarch was very enthusiastic. Miss Feng doesn't need to worry. If Kunwu doesn't have a place to stay, there will definitely be a place for you in my Shumisi. Cough cough. Before little Feng could answer, a middle-aged demon cultivator not far away coughed twice and glanced over indifferently. The Black Sun Demon Lord immediately stopped talking. Xiaofeng's heart was filled with mixed feelings. This Black Sun Demonic Lord seemed to admire her. Logically speaking, she was completely unfamiliar with the demonic cultivators of the East Sea. As a fire elemental demonic cultivator, it was indeed suspicious for her to appear in the East Sea. However, the Black Sun Demonic Lord did not seem to care and was even unusually friendly with her. He even made such a promise. Wait, was Black Sun Demon Lord stopped because he promised her easily, or because he revealed something he shouldn't have. He had indeed heard a rather abrupt word just now. Shumi Sea. What kind of place was the Shumi Sea? Wasn't he the eldest prince of the South Sea? This thought flashed through Xiao Feng's mind, and in the next moment, she decided to continue probing. Although he was stopped by the elders, Black Sun Demon Lord still said affectionately, "Miss Feng, I'm not joking." Xiao Feng pretended not to understand, still smiling politely, "Demon Lord, Xiao Feng can't thank you enough." She could guess what the Black Sun Demon Lord was thinking. He was the prince of the Qilin clan. Among the Yao cultivators, his bloodline was incomparably noble. In this world, there were very few Yao cultivators who could match him. Even if it was a descendant of a divine beast, with a slightly thinner bloodline, they were not worthy of him. For example, her original body, the bright bird. However, now that she had obtained the aura of the vermilion bird and experienced the form transformation tribulation, she was completely different. A demonic cultivator with a bloodline similar to that of a phoenix, and even stronger than him, what was there for him to hesitate about? Xiao Feng pursed her lips and revealed a faint smile. Unfortunately, she was from the fire tribe and didn't want to live in the water. There's movement. Hearing Qin Shi's low shout, Mo Tianga's spirit was roused and she looked outside. It was the 15th day of the 8th month, the roundest night of the year. The moment the moon rose from the horizon, the seawater surged, one wave higher than the other. When the moon was in the middle of the sky, the waves were already monstrous. Under the moonlight, among the waves, a thin white line appeared around the island, forming a circle. This circle was dazzlingly white, perfectly matching the full moon in the sky. Fairy Feng Qin came out of the thatched hut and showed a faint smile when she saw this white circle. She made a few hand seals, and the thatched hut shrank rapidly and was put into her sleeve. Then, with a flash of red, Fairy Feng Qin jumped into the sea and disappeared. Mo Tianga and Qin Shi looked at each other, and Mo Tianga said, "Is this what she's waiting for?" "Most likely." Qin Shi stared at the white circle, frowning and thinking. "What is this thing?" Mo Tianga said, "I think it's very likely to be a restriction." "A restriction?" Mo Tianga pointed at the full moon in the sky. "The moon rises and the tide rises. Right now is the moment of the year when the tidal force is the strongest. This white line only appears at this moment, which means it's related to the tidal force." Fairy Feng Qin once said there were faint spiritual aura fluctuations at the bottom of the sea. From what I can see, these spiritual aura fluctuations are probably caused by some hidden restriction. On the 15th day of the 8th month, the tidal force is the strongest and conflicts with this restriction, so this white line appeared. This explanation was reasonable, so Qin Shi nodded. "That makes sense." Under his gaze, Mo Tianga couldn't help but smile. She continued to say, "If that's the case, then this moment is the moment when the hidden restriction is the weakest, and it's also the moment when it's the easiest to find and break." Qin Shi's gaze changed. "Then should we follow her?" Mo Tianga didn't hesitate. She made a hand seal and hit the canoe. The restriction on the canoe buzzed and dived down. The waves on the surface of the sea were turbulent, and the undercurrent was turbulent. The canoe broke through the undercurrent and dived deeper and deeper, looking for Fairy Feng Qin. Qin Shi turned his head and looked at the white line not far away. This white line was a white wall under the sea, going all the way to the bottom of the sea. If one looked carefully, they would see it was white because it was composed of waves. The seawater was violently impacted in this narrow space, so it could only exist in the form of waves. Countless waves formed this white wall, transmitting a powerful force from afar. Qin Shi agreed with Mo Tianga's speculation. This was obviously the result of two forces colliding with each other. "I got it." The deeper they went, the darker the seawater became. Even cultivators with amazing eyesight couldn't distinguish their surroundings. Right at this moment, Mo Tiange sensed a faint spiritual aura fluctuation. The canoe chased after this spiritual aura fluctuation. The boat made of black iron heartwood was extremely smooth, and it quietly crossed the seawater. This spiritual aura fluctuation became more and more violent, and the seawater around it also became more turbulent. The undercurrent was turbulent, and the power seemed to be tearing. In front of them, Fairy Fengqing made a hand seal to release a red lotus in order to deal with the turbulent current. At this moment, she was deep in the sea. She thought no one would discover her, so she no longer concealed her breath. She didn't know there were two tails following her. Fairy Fengqing kept diving. When her feet suddenly stepped on the seabed, she showed a puzzled expression. After thinking for a moment, she took out a lamp from her chinquan bag. The beam-like lamp flickered and swayed on the seabed, but it didn't go out. The surrounding seawater was so dark that there wasn't a trace of light, which looked very strange. Small fish swam over and swam around the lamp. They had long lost their eyes after living at the bottom of the sea for a long time, but they could still feel the faint heat from the lamp. Fairy Fengqing frowned. She waved the ribbon, and a powerful force swept towards the small fish. She originally thought the small fish would die under her sweep, but unexpectedly, these small fish only retreated several feet before they swam away again. Fairy Fengqing was very surprised. Although it was just a casual wave, she was a nascent soul cultivator and these small fish were at most in the first rank. How could they be unscathed? She reached out and caught a small fish. She looked left and right but didn't see anything special, so she had to throw the small fish away in confusion and continue to look for the source of the spiritual aura fluctuation. The spiritual aura fluctuation was the strongest at the bottom of the sea. Fairy Fengqing circled around the island several times but couldn't find the source. Seeing that the tidal force was slowly receding, she anxiously continued to dive down. Since she was already at the bottom of the sea, she could only go down and dig a hole. Digging a hole wasn't something she liked at all. However, Fairy Fengqing didn't care about it anymore. If she missed this opportunity, she would have to wait another year. If it was before, she could afford to wait, but now, she couldn't. Tiandao sect was declining day by day. In order to protect its authority, four nascent soul cultivators were sent outside, leaving only two early-stage nascent soul cultivators, her and Lu Dequan, to guard the sect. She couldn't stay outside for a long time. Thinking of this, she secretly clenched her teeth. If it wasn't for Xianqing School's strong rise in the past 100 years and the emergence of many talented people, how could Tiandao sect fall into this situation? Not to mention the ownership of the #1 cultivation group in the Celestial Pole, Xianqing School's behavior was really disgusting. They were obviously the #1 cultivation group, but they pretended they didn't want to fight for power and only sent half of their nascent soul cultivators to participate in the battle. This half was equivalent to the number of nascent soul cultivators they sent, which was 4 each. More importantly, Senior Marshal Brother Lu repeatedly warned them that they couldn't afford to lose even one nascent soul cultivator now, so they had to put their own safety first. Among the 8 nascent soul cultivators in Xianqing School, aside from Zhenyang, Jinghe, and Huayan, the oldest was Miaoyi, who was only about 700 years old. As for Tiandao sect, the youngest was also about 700 years old. Thinking of this, Fairy Fengqing couldn't help but think. Aside from Zhenyang and Jinghe, the other 6 people were all in the early stage of the nascent soul realm except for Qin Shoujing, who was in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. Lord Daoist Huayan was an experienced nascent soul cultivator. Although he was only in the early stage, he wasn't easy to deal with. Miaoyi advanced to the nascent soul realm earlier than her, and Xianyin advanced to the nascent soul realm almost 200 years ago. Both of them were extremely talented and stronger than ordinary cultivators. The remaining two, Li Lingxi and Imo Qingwei, hadn't advanced to the nascent soul realm for a long time and maybe hadn't even stabilized their realms. Especially Imo Qingwei, she was too young and presumably didn't have a stable foundation. If she was careless during the battle, she sneered. Imo Qingwei was in the Eastern Sea not long ago. If she had a chance to meet her, she would. She was the youngest nascent soul cultivator in the history of the Celestial Pole. This title added a lot of glory to Xianqing School. If she died, it would be a good way to attack Xianqing School's morale. Maybe they could even take back the title of the #1 cultivation group in the Celestial Pole. Fairy Fengqing was very satisfied with her idea. She suddenly realized it would be really good if Imo Qingwei didn't exist in this world. She thought she was thinking for the sake of the sect, but she ignored the obvious jealousy in her heart. ****, what's she thinking? Imo Tiange muttered as she looked at Fairy Fengqing. Under the faint light, Fairy Fengqing dug the ground like a fairy. While she was digging, she smiled evilly from time to time, which really didn't look like a fairy at all. Chapter 596. It was hard to imagine that a restriction would be placed at the bottom of the sea. Fairy Fengqing busied herself for a while, but the deeper she went, the weaker the spiritual aura fluctuations became. She could only give up. Where is it? Fairy Fengqing was confused. The undercurrents around her became calmer and the tidal force was fading. If she couldn't find it, she could only go back to Tiandao sect first and come back later. However, the current situation was tense. She didn't know if she would have another chance in the future. What should I do? What should I do? Fairy Fengqing muttered to herself. As time passed and the undercurrents gradually subsided, she became more and more anxious. All of a sudden, she shouted, "Senior, would you rather let the treasure be covered in dust than give it to your descendants?" Upon hearing Fairy Fengqing's voice, Imo Tiange turned around and said with a smile, "She's really interesting. Will the restriction appear automatically if I shout?" Qin Shi was about to laugh, but his smile froze on his face. A rumbling sound came along the sea. It was dull but clear, as if a door that had been closed for a long time was opened, and the aura of another world filled the air. The two of them turned their heads in the direction of the voice, only to see that the previously quiet island suddenly began to shake, and an incomparably clear fluctuation of spiritual energy spread out. No way! The two of them looked at each other in dismay. Fairy Fengqing was ecstatic. She hurriedly followed the spiritual aura fluctuation and found that the source of the fluctuation was on the island instead of the bottom of the sea. "It's really amazing," Fairy Fengqing praised and quickly swam up. Imo Tiange hastily operated the formation inside the 10,000-mile solitary boat to hide her traces. Fairy Fengqing had no idea she was being followed. Seeing that there was hope for a fated chance, she was so excited that she didn't have time to be on guard. The peace in the past month had lowered her vigilance. After returning to the island, Fairy Fengqing's divine sense slowly swept every inch of the island. When she chose this island as her temporary residence, she checked the island several times to make sure there was nothing wrong with it. However, even a nascent soul cultivator didn't find anything abnormal on the island with a circumference of 2 or 3 miles. This senior's means were really shocking. After Fairy Fengqing came to the island, Imo Tiange still hid the 10,000-mile solitary boat in the dark to monitor her movements. The source of the spiritual aura fluctuation was on the small island. This also caused Imo Tiange to exclaim in admiration. It seems the rumored cultivator's cultivation level is indeed in the deification realm or above. Otherwise, how could he conceal himself so well? Aside from Fairy Fengqing, Shi and Qin Shi were also there. Qin Shi's cultivation level was higher than hers, and she was skilled in formations, but she didn't notice the restriction this senior left behind at all. This was only a small island with a circumference of 2 to 3 square miles, but the restriction was right under the noses of the 3 nascent soul cultivators. As she thought up to this point, Mo Tiange suddenly fixed her gaze and muttered, "The small island." Qin Shi noticed her strange expression and asked, "What's wrong? What's the problem?" Mo Tiange thought for a while, then raised her eyebrows and said, "I know what's going on with this restriction." Seeing that she was in high spirits, Qin Shi smiled and said, "You can tell. It can only be considered an inference. I'm not 100% sure." Fairy Fengqing said she obtained this information from a letter written by a previous elder of Bishuan court. This means that the discovery of the Qilin bone happened about 1,000 years ago. As for the legend of the Qilin, it can't be too late. Adding the two together, it's thousands of years. She paused for a moment, then looked at Qin Shi and said, "Thousands of years have passed, and the world has changed. When I went to look for my great ancestors' estate, I saw with my own eyes that many islands disappeared or shifted positions. Especially this small island with a circumference of only a few square miles like this one. Even a slightly stronger storm could make it sink. But look at this small island. Why is it not only well preserved, but its position hasn't changed much after several thousand years?" Qin Shi said, "Since that senior set a restriction here, it's not strange for this small island to be exactly the same. That's what I'm talking about. It's impossible to set a large restriction on a small area, especially this restriction. It's practically integrated with the small island. Therefore, I speculate that this island is the restriction itself." "So what?" Qin Shi was puzzled. Mo Tiange smiled and said, "Since the whole island is a restriction, you can consider it a unique magic weapon." Qin Shi's eyes lit up. He understood what she meant. "You mean, the whole island can be taken away?" Mo Tiange nodded lightly. "In theory. For a nascent soul cultivator, it wasn't difficult to take away such a small island." Qin Shi said, "Isn't that simple? If we can't crack it for now, we can take it away first." Right after he finished speaking, they heard a rumbling sound coming from the small island, followed by endless splashing sounds. The two of them turned their heads to look. They didn't know how Fairy Fengqing did it, but a pool slowly rose in the center of the small island. The pool wasn't big enough to swim and could probably only be used for bathing. The strange thing was that the whole pool was extremely clear. This small island was too small to form an independent water source. Logically speaking, a pool was also connected to the sea, so it couldn't be so clear. Fairy Fengqing stood by the pool and hesitated for a while. Suddenly, she made up her mind. She summoned her red lotus and jumped into the pool. Mo Tiange uttered an "huh" and said, "It seems this is the entrance." She could feel that the pool didn't have any restrictions. It was the only gap in the restrictions on the whole island. "Should we follow her?" "Let's wait first," Qin Shi said. "If we get too close, we'll be discovered by her. It's not time for us to show up yet." Mo Tiange answered with an "N." If they were discovered by Fairy Fengqing now, there would probably be two consequences. One was that they'd fight, the other was that Fairy Fengqing was afraid of their strength, so she feigned civility and looked for an opportunity to lead them to death. Either way, it wouldn't be good for them, so they'd better wait. After Fairy Fengqing went down, she disappeared from their divine senses. No matter how they manipulated their divine senses, they couldn't trace her whereabouts. This restriction was indeed powerful. It was no wonder it hadn't been discovered even after such a long time. The two of them waited patiently for a while, but they didn't see any movement. However, Qin Shi's divine sense was suddenly touched. "Someone's coming." Qin Shi frowned and added, "It should be beast cultivators. More than 1/8 rank beast cultivator or above." Mo Tiango was surprised. This isn't the territory of 8th rank beast cultivators yet. Why are there beast cultivators here? She thought for a moment and said, could it be beast cultivators from the South Sea? Bishuan Court was already occupied by beast cultivators. In order to fight against cultivators from the Celestial Pole, the South Sea probably sent beast cultivators to guard Bishuan Court again. No matter what, we should hide first. Qin Shi's expression became even more solemn. There's a 10th rank beast cultivator, a 10th rank beast cultivator. Mo Tiango was shocked. If it's a 10th rank beast cultivator, it's really not safe to hide outside. How about we also go into the pool? Wait. Qin Shi felt something in his heart. It was little Feng who sent him a voice transmission through thought. Master, the eldest prince of the South Sea, Xian Ri, has brought 6 subordinates here. Among them, there are 2 10th rank beast cultivators. You should quickly hide. Since they could send a voice transmission through thought, little Feng must be nearby. Qin Shi suddenly thought of something and asked, are you safe? Little Feng said, rest assured, master. They didn't suspect me because I called myself a beast cultivator from Kunwu. It's too late. Among them, there's a beast cultivator who's good at perception. Even if you hide your breath, you can't hide from him. Hurry. Alright, you have to be careful. If there's a chance, think of a way to escape. Qin Shi gave her a brief explanation then said to Mo Tiange, let's go in. Mo Tiange nodded. She made several hand seals and hit the restrictions on the 10,000 miles canoe. A layer of light shone on the restrictions, and the canoe silently sailed towards the small island. When it fell into the pond, it didn't even cause a splash. The moment they sank into the pool, their surroundings were instantly cut off. Their divine senses, sight, and hearing could no longer sense the island and the sea outside the pool. It was as if they had entered another world. Mo Tiange closed her eyes and sensed for a while. She then said with amazement, what a wonderful restriction. It actually isolated the inside of the restriction into another world. It's similar to the art of tearing space. No, this isn't just a restriction, it's a formation. Restrictions and formations came from the same source. The only difference was that formations were visible and comprehensive, while restrictions were invisible and independent. This restriction could actually create an independent space, so it could already be considered a formation. Yes. Qin Shi nodded. Judging from this formation alone, its master must be extraordinary. By the way, why did you say wait just now? Qin Shi answered, it's Xiaofeng. Xiaofeng is now with those beast cultivators. She sent us a message and told us to hide. Mo Tiange asked curiously, why is Xiaofeng with them? She didn't say. However, we can roughly guess that she must have encountered beast cultivators when she went to inquire about the news that day. She had to pretend to be a beast cultivator in Kunwu and was invited to be their companion. He then said with a smile, you definitely can't guess who she met by chance. Who? Mo Tiange was curious. From what he said, that beast cultivator must have some connection with them. Was it Xianyu Monster Monarch again? Qin Shi said, Xiaofeng said it was Xuanri, the eldest prince of the South Sea. The eldest prince of the South Sea. Xuanri. Mo Tiange was stunned. Is he Xianyu Monster Monarch's elder brother? Probably. Qin Shi said with a smile, this is interesting. Based on the performance of those beast cultivators, the eldest prince and the second prince didn't get along. The second prince led the army to fight, but most of the high-level beast cultivators died. Now that the eldest prince suddenly appeared. I'm afraid this battle for the throne has already spread to the Eastern Sea. Isn't this our chance? Mo Tiange's eyes brightened. If they fight, we can fish in troubled waters and go back to Kunwu. Right. Chin, she smiled. Let's wait and watch a good show. At this moment, Xianyu Monster Monarch was anxiously pacing back and forth in Bishuan Court. Second Prince. At the door, Die's figure appeared and walked quickly towards him. Upon seeing her, Xianyu Monster Monarch asked hurriedly, "How is it?" Die said with a cold expression. The scouts reported that the eldest prince seemed to have received some news. He left Shumi Sea a few days ago and came to the Eastern Sea. What? Xianyu Monster Monarch's expression changed. We haven't found any clues yet, but they're already on the move. What if they beat us to it? Second Prince, don't panic. Jing Hu said in a deep voice, first, the eldest prince might be doing this to confuse us. Second, even if he really found that place, he might not succeed. We can't panic. Upon hearing what Jing Hu said, Xianyu Monster Monarch stood still and nodded calmly. Elder Jing is right. We lost a lot on this trip, so we must be more careful. He thought for a while, then turned to look at Die. Elder Dai, where is the eldest prince now? Die said indifferently, I'll send people to search the Eastern Sea. Chapter 597. Blue, white, black, and gold light flew over and stopped in the air above the island. Black Sun Demon Master scanned with his divine sense and was surprised. Why is there no movement? The middle-aged demonic cultivator beside Black Sun Demon Master muttered, there was indeed a weak aura just now, but it's gone now. Humans. Black Sun Demon Master scanned the island again, feeling a little excited. He grew up in the deep sea and had never been on land or seen humans. The middle-aged demonic cultivator laughed. First Prince, this is the depths of the East Sea. Humans won't come here easily. Besides, not long ago, the second prince led the army to attack the human sects along the coast. I think the human cultivators in this area must have been wiped out. Really? Black Sun Demon Master was a little disappointed. Thinking of Xianyu, he gnashed his teeth in hatred. Humph. That brat, does he think he can win my favor by doing this? Didn't he see how many demonic cultivators above the 8th rank he brought with him? The middle-aged demonic cultivator glanced at Xiao Feng and said, First Prince, why are you worried? This task is of no benefit to you. If you win, it'll be a matter of course. If you lose, it'll ruin your image as a ruler. First Prince is the rightful heir of the South Sea, so you don't need to add to your achievements. Second Prince was forced to do this. Otherwise, he wouldn't have been able to compete with you. Elder Jing is right. The First Prince seemed to trust the middle-aged demonic cultivator very much. He calmed down after hearing this. The middle-aged demonic cultivator laughed again. Besides, if we can get to the treasure first, Second Prince's efforts will be in vain. He volunteered to come here for. He paused as if he suddenly realized there was an outsider here. Xiao Feng pondered. Did the demonic cultivators from the South Sea invade for another purpose? It made sense. With so many demonic cultivators in Kunwu, how could there be enough materials to distribute? Besides, according to her master, the South Sea was dangerous but had many treasures. The middle-aged demonic cultivator turned his eyes to Xiao Feng. Seeing Xiao Feng looking at the island casually, he relaxed a little. Speaking of the purpose of this trip, Black Sun Demon Master was in high spirits. Yes, we'll definitely achieve our goal this time. Let's see if Xianyu can still laugh then. First Prince is right, the middle-aged demonic cultivator said respectfully. The Black Sun Demon Lord was even more pleased with himself and said, then let's quickly solve the riddle. The treasure is right in front of us. First Prince, please wait. Seeing that the Crown Prince had become infinitely optimistic after just a few words of praise, the middle-aged Fey cultivator hurriedly stopped him. Crown Prince, he is a divine monarch senior after all. His divine strength is extraordinary. We must be extremely careful. Hearing this, Black Sun Demon Lord was a little disappointed. However, he had always respected Elder Jing, so he said, "Elder is right. In your opinion, what should we do?" Elder Jing looked at the small island beneath his feet and said, "From the strange phenomenon, this island is our destination. However, the Holy Land has been around for so long, but no one has ever found it. I'm afraid it's not as simple as it looks on the surface." The 8th rank beast cultivator hesitated for a moment before saying, "Eldest Prince, Elder Jing, I didn't find any restrictions." Hearing that, Black Sun Demon Lord said anxiously, "Elder, look, don't lower your guard." Elder Jing emphasized again. He was worried about the Crown Prince's impatient character. We demonic cultivators are far less proficient in the Tao of formations and restrictions than humans. We must be extremely careful. Got it. Black Sun Demon Lord's tone started to become a little impatient. He thought to himself, no wonder Father didn't like Elder Jing very much. He was really too long-winded. Elder Jing swept his gaze across and instructed the 3 9th rank beast cultivators. "The 3 of you go down and scout the way first." The 3 beast cultivators responded in unison. They split into 3 different directions and landed on the small island. Elder Jing's gaze turned to the only 8th rank beast cultivator. "Jin Jing, from now on, you must be extremely careful. If there is even the slightest accident, you must tell us." This 8th rank beast cultivator with extraordinary talent and extremely sharp senses looked like a very skinny young girl of 14 or 15 years old. Her appearance was ordinary and she had a timid expression. She was no different from a human girl, but that head of golden hair was very different from a human's. "Yes," Jin Jing replied timidly. She had just reached the 8th rank and her cultivation was far from Elder Jing's requirements. Under normal circumstances, she would not be chosen. It was only because she had a special talent that Elder Jing included her in the list of people who would go along with him. Above the small island, other than Black Moon Demon Lord, Elder Jing, and Jin Jing, there was also a sloppily dressed black-skinned man with a big beard. He stood at the side lazily and had not said a word until now. However, no one could ignore him because his cultivation was the same as Elder Jing's. They were both at the 10th rank. The 3 9th rank beast cultivators landed on the small island and began to search inch by inch. The small island was really too small. Even if they were to be as thorough as the grass and trees, it only took them an hour to finish the search. The 3 beasts flew back one after another and reported, "Crown Prince, there's nothing unusual." Black Sun Demon Lord turned to look at Elder Jing. Elder Jing asked Jin Jing, "What about you?" Jin Jing shook her head dejectedly. Elder Jing pondered for a moment and turned to call out, "Enrich, go and check it out." The black-skinned man was rubbing the mud off his body. When he heard that, he lifted his head and grinned at Elder Jing. "Old Jing, you want me to check it out? Is it what I think it is?" Elder Jing glanced at him. "What else? Do you know anything else?" The black-skinned man chuckled, "Then I won't stand on ceremony." As soon as he finished speaking, he took a step forward and transformed into his true form with a shake of his body. It was an enormous and swarthy black loach. The bloodline of loaches was extremely lowly. It was difficult for them to even become demonic beasts, let alone transform into human form. However, this black loach not only went through the calamity and transformed, but also cultivated to the peak of demonic beasts, at the 10th rank. Such an achievement could not be described as shocking. The black loach named Enrich opened its mouth and sucked in suddenly. Instantly, a strong wind blew and the airflow surged. A strong suction force sucked in the flowers and trees on the small island. First the dust, then the flowers, then the trees. Finally, when there was nothing left to suck, even half of the ground was sucked up. After sucking, Enrich closed his mouth and chewed, swallowing everything in one breath. He smacked his lips and said unsatisfactorily, "Disgusting, too disgusting." Elder Jing was too lazy to comment on this sentence. He smiled at Black Sun Demon Lord, "Eldest Prince, I know where the entrance is." Oh. Black Sun Demon Lord was baffled. He did not notice anything wrong. How did Elder Jing know? Elder Jing pointed to the pool in the center and said in a deep voice, "Eldest Prince, please take a look. Enrich's heaven swallowing technique is amazing. Why is the pool not moving at all?" Black Sun Demon Lord looked and was enlightened. "I see." Even half of the ground was sucked out, but the water in the pool did not move at all. They had all seen Enrich using the heaven swallowing technique. Not to mention a pool of water, even a shallow beach could be sucked clean by him. What about below? Is this a formation? Elder Jing said, "Let's go down and break the formation." It had been 6 hours, and they were still in the water. Moreover, it was fresh water, not seawater. Mo Tiange looked solemn. She would believe that the pool was connected to the sea, but they had tasted the surrounding water, and it was still fresh water. How could there be so much fresh water on a small island that they couldn't get out of it after 6 hours? How about we let Xiaofan go out and have a look? Qin Shi suggested. Mo Tiange shook her head. Xiaofan's cultivation level is too low, and it's too honest. If something happens, I'm afraid it won't be able to handle it. Qin Shi thought about it and agreed. Xiaofan was dumb, but as a ferocious sea dragon, it was as naive as a blank sheet of paper. Wouldn't it be courting death to let it be the vanguard? If it encountered a demonic beast with higher spiritual intelligence, it would probably be tricked into selling it and help its owner earn money. The two stood next to the boat and saw the water above the boat was calm and clear. It was as gentle and beautiful as amber. But their hearts were extremely heavy, because they were not people who admired amber, but little insects trapped in amber. As far as their divine senses could reach, there was nothing but water. They didn't know whether their divine senses were misled or it was water to begin with, but they knew it was definitely not a good thing if it went on like this. Where did this senior come from? I've never heard of this kind of formation. Mo Tiange frowned. The strangest thing is that I've seen brilliant formations before. The Immortal Palace in the Sea of Returning Ruins and the Sandstorm City in the far west are all ancient formations, but none of them are this strange. Qin Shi said slowly, those two places more or less had loopholes because of the passage of time, but this one doesn't. Yes, that's the scariest thing. Mo Tiange's expression was gloomy, but she also felt powerless. In the past, no matter how powerful the formation was, she wasn't afraid because it was clearly placed in front of her and she could knock it down. But this time, she couldn't even touch the door. There was no spiritual aura abnormality, no yin and yang chaos, no signs of confusion, and no means of attack. From the moment they entered the pool, they seemed to have jumped into a black hole with only water. Everything was very calm, but it was also terrifyingly calm. They hadn't been able to find Fairy Fengqing. From the moment she jumped into the pool, they lost track of her. How big was this pool? Even a nascent soul cultivator's divine sense couldn't find its edge. What should we do? Mo Tiange murmured. She was asking Qin Shi as well as herself. This feeling of being in the dark was terrible. We can't keep waiting like this. Qin Shi was halfway through his words when the 10,000 miles canoe suddenly trembled. The two of them looked at each other, both feeling happy. They weren't afraid of trouble. What they were afraid of was no change. As long as there was a change in spiritual aura, they could find a way to break the formation. However, the next moment, the 10,000 miles canoe suddenly trembled violently. Tienge made a hand seal and hit the restrictions on the canoe, but she still couldn't stabilize it. A powerful force was pressing towards them. She raised his head and looked around. The water around them was no longer calm. It had become extremely turbulent, just like the turbulent seawater before they entered the formation. However, this force was more than 100 times stronger. Tienge, he called out. Tienge barely managed to stabilize herself. She grabbed his outstretched hand and said loudly, I can't control it anymore. The powerful force seemed to be able to topple the mountains and overturn the seas, pressing towards them. They could only choose to stabilize the restrictions on the canoe to prevent the protective cover from being crushed and let the canoe drift along with the current. Gradually, a white light seemed to appear in the distance. Then with a splash, the 10,000 miles canoe was thrown out along with the current. Chapter 598. Senior Marshal Sister, wake up. Anxious cries came into her ears. She struggled in the black void for a long time before she finally woke up. The blurry scene in front of her gradually became clear. The first thing she saw was a delicate and pretty woman with tears on her face. Seeing her awake, she was very surprised. Senior Marshal Sister, you finally woke up. She looked a bit confused. What? What did you call me? The woman was stunned. Senior Marshal Sister, what's wrong? She pressed her forehead and whispered, my head hurts. Then rest for a while, the woman said. Marshal Uncle said you suffered a blow, so you, blow. She murmured. Suddenly, her head hurt again. Countless memories rushed into her mind as if they were going to tear her head apart. Senior Marshal Sister. The woman panicked. Wait, I'll call someone. A moment later, a man and a woman rushed in. The woman shouted, Tienge. As soon as the memories stopped pouring in, her headache disappeared. She raised her head and looked at the three people in front of her. The elegant middle-aged scholar was her father, and the beautiful young woman with a kind face next to him was her mother. Behind them, the delicate and pretty girl taking care of her was her junior marshal sister, Nia Wushang. The blow, her junior marshal sister said, was something that happened not long ago. When she formed her gold core, she became Dao companions with a senior marshal brother. The couple loved each other for 100 years and advanced to the nascent soul realm together. Unexpectedly, not long ago, this senior marshal brother suddenly attacked their master, Lord Daoist Jinghe, stole the sect-guarding treasure, and betrayed them. Only then did they realize he had bad intentions. Her father looked at her angrily, that traitor, why are you still sad for him? Her mother grabbed her hand and cried. Silly child. Silly child. She was a bit confused. The person she loved for 100 years turned out to be a traitor. This was quite tragic, but why was she so numb? As soon as she thought about this, she suddenly felt a sharp pain in her heart. She was extremely sad, and tears fell uncontrollably. Seeing this, her mother hugged her and burst into tears. Her father frowned. Why are you crying? It's good that this scoundrel with evil intentions has left. Her mother said angrily, Tienge is sad. Can't you be a little more understanding? What kind of father are you? However, his father said, she is sad, so you should console her. Acting like you will only make her more sad. Her father and mother quarreled, and her junior sister comforted her quietly, Senior sister, don't be sad. I don't believe that senior brother Qin would do such a thing. There must be some hidden reasons. She lowered her head and wept. What other secrets could there be? He told me himself, but do you believe it? Do you believe senior brother Chin is that kind of person? She hesitated. This, senior brother Chin has always been kind. How many people in the sect have received his kindness? He had even saved the lives of Fengxue, Qing Yu, and the others. I don't believe that senior martial brother Chin is a treacherous person who would bite the hand that feeds him. She quietly glanced at her parents. Seeing that they were still arguing, she nodded and said softly, "All right, come find me later." Not long after, her parents finally realized her existence. Her mother comforted her for a while, and she used the excuse of resting to send her parents away. Only the two of them were left in the cave. Her junior sister said anxiously, "Senior martial sister, let's go. I have Grandmaster Jinghe's identity tablet." She nodded. Okay. Grandmaster Jinghe was her and senior martial brother Chin's master. She and Nia Wushang called each other martial sister because Nia Wushang's master was her father's junior martial brother. As for her, because of her outstanding aptitude, she was accepted as a disciple by Grandmaster Jinghe early on. In the group, her seniority was equal to her father's. Later, when she formed her nascent soul, her seniority was even higher. Of course, among relatives, only seniority was considered, so her father couldn't call her martial uncle. Thinking of this, she suddenly became absent-minded. Her father was a core formation cultivator, but what about her mother? She was almost 200 years old now, so her mother should be a foundation-building cultivator at least. However, she didn't feel any spiritual aura from her mother's body just now. Ah. She suddenly felt pain in her head, and she let out a low cry. The junior martial sister leading the way was startled and hurriedly pulled her back. "Senior martial sister, do you have a headache again?" She shook her head. "I'm fine." The junior martial sister was still worried, so she warned her again, "Senior martial sister, you have to be careful to conceal your cultivation level and disguise yourself as a core formation cultivator." "No, there are also a limited number of core formation cultivators, so you should be a foundation-building cultivator." Mo Tiange nodded softly. This junior martial sister was also better than her master. Their master was only a core formation cultivator, but she formed her gold core in less than 100 years and now had a chance to advance to the nascent soul realm. It would be easier for her to disguise herself as a foundation-building disciple with the junior martial sister leading the way. Because of the nascent soul cultivators' rebellion, the school's great mountain protecting formation was fully activated, and low-level disciples were not allowed to enter or leave. Even core formation cultivators had to hold the identity tablets of Lord Taoist Xunyang and Jinghe, the two nascent soul cultivators. Mo Tiange disguised herself as a foundation-building cultivator and used a disguising spell to slightly change her appearance, so she easily went out of the school. Then, her flying magic weapon carried her and her junior martial sister eastward at a moderate pace. When they were about 50 kilometers away from the flying magic weapon, the junior martial sister asked, "Senior martial sister, do you know where senior martial brother Chin is going?" Mo Tiange shook her head blankly. "I don't know. He doesn't have another residence outside the school." She suddenly thought of a possibility and murmured, "Could it be there?" After thinking for a moment, she flung her sleeve to summon a small boat and stepped on it with her junior martial sister. "There's a place he might go." After several days of rushing, they arrived at a tall mountain. This mountain was extremely tall. At the foot of the mountain was a dense forest, and the mountainside was beginning to be dyed white. The summit was covered with snow-white peaks, sparkling and translucent under the sunlight. It was extremely beautiful. This was Demonic Mountain, the most dangerous place in the Celestial Pole. Demonic Mountain. The junior martial sister was bewildered. Senior Marshal Sister, is this the place you're talking about? Mo Tiange nodded lightly. Demonic Mountain was the place where they pledged their love. Maybe, just maybe, he would come here. Besides, Demonic Mountain was a first-class hiding place. The restrictions hadn't been opened yet, so if they hid inside, who could find them? But Senior Marshal Sister, the restrictions on Demonic Mountain haven't been opened yet. How can we go in? I know a place we can go in. She steered the small boat to a kernel. This was the place where the restrictions on Demonic Mountain were the weakest. He was the one who told her about this. She took out a simple and unadorned long sword from her bosom and poured all her spiritual aura into it. The body of the sword flashed with golden lightning bolts, and she ruthlessly smashed the weakest part of the restrictions. With a loud bang, the restrictions split open. Mo Tiange put away the long sword and slowly flew in the small boat with her junior marshal sister. Inside the restrictions, it seemed to be another world. The sky was dim, lightning bolts flashed everywhere. The reddish-brown earth was full of devastation. Fierce winds blew like knives. There were drifting restrictions, damaged magic weapons, and scattered bones everywhere. Mo Tiange didn't stop and slowly flew towards a mountain peak. That mountain peak was called Tens of Thousands of Feet Peak. Their memories were there. The flying boat under their feet didn't stop. Soon, they arrived at their destination. Half of Tens of Thousands of Feet Peak had collapsed during the last battle, and the other half had become flat. It no longer had its former dangerous appearance. When she arrived here, her heart trembled. She lowered her head and looked down. In the chilly wind, a person was sitting among the rocks with his back facing them. He wore a high hat and a broad belt, and his posture was tall and straight. No matter what time it was, he was always calm like an unbreakable mountain. Senior Marshal Brother Qin. On the small boat, her junior marshal sister already shouted. Previously, when she thought about the betrayal, she always felt like she was listening to a story and couldn't get into it. But now, when she looked at his back, she realized that her heart was full of love and couldn't be faked. The flying boat landed. She stared at his back in a daze and walked forward step by step. Stop! An angry shout came from above. A woman in red stepped on a red lotus and descended from the sky, landing between her and Mo Tiange. Mo Tiange stopped. You, the woman in red's pink face was filled with anger. If you take another step forward, don't blame me for being impolite. She stared at the woman and asked in a deep voice, Who are you? What does it have to do with you if I meet my husband? The woman in red snorted coldly. My name is Feng Qing. The husband you mentioned is my husband. Do you think it has anything to do with me? Mo Tiange was stunned. What? Fairy Feng Qing turned around and called softly, Qin Lang, come and tell her. Under her gaze, the man slowly stood up, turned around and walked towards her step by step. She stared at his face. He still had handsome features and dazzling elegance, but the way he looked at her was different from before. It was so deep that she couldn't see the bottom. Qin Lang. Fairy Feng Qing held his arm, looked up and said, Tell her what our relationship is. A hint of hesitation flashed in his eyes, and he instinctively wanted to withdraw his arm. What's going on? He shook his head and thought, Little Sister Qing and I are childhood sweethearts. She sacrificed a lot to help me take revenge, so how could I not want to be close to her? But the woman in front of him looked very familiar at first glance. He even couldn't help but want to walk forward and hold her hand. How could this be? Did he turn his act into reality? Senior Marshal Brother Qin, how can you do this? His junior marshal sister rushed forward and shouted, You betrayed the school, sneak-attacked Grandmaster Jinghe, injured Grandmaster Jinyang, stole the school's sacred object, and now you even hooked up with another woman. You're too shameless. Her junior marshal sister pulled her clothes and said, "Senior marshal sister, senior marshal brother Qin changed. He actually betrayed you. Quickly kill him. He's always been like this." Fairy Fengqing held his arm, raised her head, and gave her a contemptuous look. "Everything about you and you is fake." His ancestor was killed by Qin Jinghe, so he endured the humiliation and entered Xianqing school, waiting for an opportunity to take revenge in one fell swoop. Unfortunately, that old thing Qin Jinghe escaped. He didn't betray you or the school, but he was fake from the beginning. No, impossible. She muttered to herself and stared into his eyes. "Tell me, is it true?" Meeting her gaze, he shivered, but in the end, he turned his head away and said softly, "Yes. It's all fake. Your feelings, your actions, they're all fake." He answered again, but this time, he was more determined than before. "Yes. Senior marshal sister, kill him. Kill him," his junior marshal sister shouted from behind. "He's no longer senior marshal brother Qin. He's a traitor who betrayed the school, his wife, and his friends." She clenched her fists and just stared at him in a daze. "Senior marshal sister, have you forgotten marshal uncle's instructions? Have you forgotten Grandmaster Jinghe? Quickly kill him." She loosened her fists, and a spiritual light flashed in her right hand, and a colorful fan appeared in her hand. "Qin Lang, kill her, and you can sever all ties with Xianqing school." Seeing the long sword burning with real fire in front of him, she was finally disappointed and raised the heaven and earth fan. "Since you're just a traitor, I'll sever all ties with you today." The heaven and earth fan and the three yang real fire sword released an astonishing killing intent at the same time. In the next moment, it seemed like they would perish together. Chapter 599. Mountains and rivers flew out of the heaven and earth fan, and the three yang real fire sword transformed into thousands of flying swords with amazing momentum. Ah! With a scream, the junior sister was hit by the heaven and earth fan and the three yang real fire sword at the same time. She looked at the two of them in shock, then her figure slowly became transparent and finally faded away, disappearing without a trace. At the same time, the scenery around them began to blur, like a landscape painting being erased little by little. Fairy Fengqing was shocked. "What's going on? How could this be?" Mo Tiange and Qin Shi were very calm. The rocks under their feet lost their color, and the restriction in the sky disappeared without a trace. What replaced it was a vast immortal palace. They didn't know where this immortal palace was located, but it was surrounded by white clouds that stretched as far as the eye could see. They raised their heads and saw a young man half lying on the horizontal board of the immortal palace. He was dressed in white, elegant, and otherworldly, and was fiddling with the 9 interlocking rings with great relish. Mo Tiange was surprised. They were trapped in the illusion and almost killed each other. Was it because of this young man? "Where is this?" Fairy Fengqing murmured. She wasn't like Mo Tiange and Qin Shi, who saw through the illusion themselves and broke out of the realm. She was broken by an external force, so she wasn't out of the play yet and was fighting with the character in the illusion. The three of them appeared here, but the young man didn't even bat an eyelid. He was still focused on solving the 9 interlocking rings. Qin Shi gently pulled Mo Tiange and said, "He doesn't have any spiritual aura." Mo Tiange took a closer look. This young man didn't have any spiritual aura, let alone spiritual aura. How could this be? Is he immortal? "It's rude to pry at will," the young man suddenly said. He waved his hand casually, and their seas of consciousness suddenly felt a sharp pain. The pain came and went quickly, disappearing in the next moment. The two of them were still in shock and looked at the young man. What realm is he in? He has no spiritual aura, but he can hurt our seas of consciousness easily. The Sea of Consciousness was the most secret place for cultivators. Even if the body was destroyed, the Sea of Consciousness might not be hurt unless the divine sense was severely damaged. Just now, their divine senses weren't attacked, but their seas of consciousness were in pain. Such means, could it be that this person was a semi-divinity stage senior? Qin took a step forward and cupped his hands in greeting. Junior is Qin Shoujing from Xianqing School in the Celestial Pole. This is Junior's Taoist partner, Mo Qingwei. Greetings to Senior. That's more like it. The young man snorted, put away the 9 chains, and looked down at them. I want to ask you, why did you trespass into my immortal palace? Qin, she said, I really didn't mean to trespass into the immortal palace. Not too long ago, monster cultivators invaded my Kunwu, and the place we were guarding was destroyed by them. Because of that, we wandered around the Eastern Sea and inadvertently intruded into the immortal palace. I hope Senior can forgive us for our rudeness. Humph. The young man said lazily, so you were defeated by a demonic cultivator. How useless. Qin smiled apologetically. Junior's skills are mediocre, I've made Senior laugh. The young man seemed to be a little curious, and he continued to ask, why were you guys beaten by the demonic cultivators? The East Sea. When did the East Sea monster cultivators become so powerful? You've done well. Qin, she said, Senior guessed wrong. It wasn't the beast cultivators of the Eastern Sea, it was the beast cultivators of the Southern Sea. South Sea monster cultivators? The young man frowned slightly. The South Sea is thousands of miles away from the Celestial Pole. Besides, the South Sea is much more fertile than the Celestial Pole. Why did the South Sea monster cultivators come all the way to the Celestial Pole? Qin paused and shook his head. Junior doesn't know either. The young man thought for a while, then suddenly clapped his hands and said with a smile, South Sea monster cultivators? I'm afraid they're Shumi Sea monster cultivators, right? Qin was stunned. He heard the name Shumi Sea from the monster cultivators before, but he just thought it was a certain sea area in the South Sea. Now that he heard this young man say, it seemed to be a different place. Mo Tiange rushed to ask, Senior, what kind of place is Shumi Sea? The young man said, Shumi Sea is a mysterious sea area in the South Sea. It's both inside and outside the South Sea, so it's quite unique. He then glared at her. Why should I tell you this? Mo Tiange was bewildered. She didn't ask him to tell her. If he didn't want to tell her, then he wouldn't. The young man muttered to himself, Shumi Sea invades the Celestial Pole. That's even more unnecessary. By the way. He turned around and asked, what else? Do you still have battles? Qin and Mo Tiange looked at each other, both showing puzzled expressions. How did he know there were other battles? Qin answered, Senior's right. Not long ago, the world changed. All the continents drifted, and the Celestial Pole connected to the west. Now, the monster cultivators from the west are invading, and Kunwa's devil path is rising again. The world changed and the continents drifted. The young man was surprised. What's going on? Senior doesn't know. Qin said strangely, all the continents moved. Senior is in the Eastern Sea, so you should know. The young man didn't answer this question. He just continued to ask with great interest, tell me in detail. Thus, Qin told her everything in full detail. Whether it was the restriction on the island or the illusion behind it, it was enough to prove that the master was a cultivator whose realm surpassed the nascent soul realm. Just now, the young man casually attacked them, which showed that their lives were in his hands. That being the case, why did they have to play tricks? At least, it seemed this senior didn't want to hurt them. Whatever he asked, they just answered honestly. When she finished talking about the recent situation, the young man sat on the plaque and sighed. The world is in chaos. Is it time for reincarnation again? Reincarnation? Mo Tiange muttered inwardly. This senior's tone didn't sound like it was a good thing. The young man sighed, then looked at them and said, being able to enter my immortal palace means you're fated with me. I can't even count how many tens of thousands of years it's been, but you're the first people to come here. Mo Tiange asked curiously, may I ask senior's name? What's your origin? Why are you trapped here for such a long time? The young man said faintly, my name is Hupe. Even if I told you, you wouldn't know my origin. As for other things, you'd better not ask. Mo Tiange asked again, senior just said the world is in chaos and time for reincarnation. What does that mean? Hupe was a bit impatient with her questions. He said, stop talking nonsense. Do I have to answer whatever you ask? Mo Tiange cursed inwardly. This senior is really... He's kind to Qin Shi, but he treats me like this. Does he have a habit of splitting peaches? Just as this thought crossed her mind, Hupe on the plaque flew into a rage and shouted at her, what are you thinking? Mo Tiange was stunned. She pointed at him and said, you. She finally remembered that cultivators in the deification realm and above could sense the thoughts of lower-level cultivators. Her malicious speculation about him must have been sensed. Seeing Hupe's angry expression, she was about to say something to ease his anger when she suddenly saw his pinky. Her heart skipped a beat, but in the next second, she said, Senior always looks very impatient when talking to me. Whatever he says, Senior always explains it nicely. This inevitably makes people think the wrong things. You. Hupe stood up angrily as if he was about to attack. Qin Shi hastily stepped forward and stood in front of him. Senior, she has a big mouth but doesn't mean it. Please don't take it to heart. Hupe shouted, what do you mean by big mouth but doesn't mean it? I'm a mind reader. For a moment, Qin Shi didn't know how to answer. He didn't know what happened and didn't understand why Hupe was suddenly enraged. He turned his head, wanting to get some hints from Mo Tiange, but she didn't even look at him. She said to Hupe, Senior, why are you so angry? Could it be that I was right? You. Hupe was so angry that he stuttered. In the end, he said angrily, if I don't teach you a lesson, you really don't know the immensity of heaven and earth. He raised his hand towards Mo Tiange. In an instant, Mo Tiange felt as if her sea of knowledge was hit by something, causing her to feel a sharp pain again. She couldn't help but cry out in pain, but she clenched her teeth and endured it. Tiange. Seeing that she was in so much pain that she was holding her head and squatting on the ground, Qin Shi hastily said to Hupe, Senior, please be lenient. Hupe just sneered. Qin Shi still wanted to say something, but Mo Tiange pulled his sleeve. She endured the pain and said softly, don't worry about me. She was in so much pain that her face was pale and her forehead was covered in sweat, but her gaze was firm as if she had another meaning. Qin Shi paused for a moment then said, I don't care if you can bear it or not, I can't just watch. Mo Tiange's gaze warmed. She smiled at him and said, it's okay. I'll really be okay. As she said that, she slowly straightened her body and wiped the sweat off her face. Her gaze made Hupe a bit uneasy. Moreover, he knew that if he continued like this, his secret would be exposed, so he wanted to remove the spell and say some polite words. Unexpectedly, Mo Tiange already said, Senior, it doesn't seem to hurt anymore. Hupe was furious again. Do you really want to die? Mo Tiange chuckled. She stood up straight and looked at him with her head held high. Senior has to be able to kill me first. Hoopa was stunned. Seeing her fearless appearance and sensing her thoughts, he couldn't help but feel a chill. You, Emotinga took a step forward. Senior, why don't you do it? With your cultivation level, if you want to kill us, you only need to move your fingers, right? She smiled faintly. Hoopa, you have this name, but you don't have a surname. It's really strange. It doesn't seem like the name of a high-level cultivator, it seems more like the name of a servant or a spiritual beast. Hoopa's expression became gloomy. Emotinga said, Senior knows nothing about the changes in the outside world. Presumably, you haven't left the Immortal Palace for a long time. I wonder if you don't want to leave or if you can't. Hoopa stared at her and said with a gloomy tone, What do you want to say? Emotinga suddenly smiled and said gently, Senior, Junior doesn't want to be Senior's enemy. It's just that Senior is unwilling to tell me your identity and background, so Junior has to resort to this unwise plan. Hoopa was dumbfounded. Sensing that her current state of mind was calm, he became even angrier. Are you deliberately playing with me? Emotinga said, If Senior told me honestly, I wouldn't have to resort to this unwise plan. Hoopa snorted and said angrily, I won't tell you. What can you do to me? He looked like a child throwing a tantrum. Emotinga smiled. Senior, don't you feel uncomfortable being trapped here for tens of thousands of years? Hoopa was silent. She then said, If my guess is correct, Senior is that divine beast, Qilin, right? Chapter 600. Hoopa, the young man in white, sat on the Immortal Palace plaque in silence. Upon seeing his expression, Qinshi knew Emotinga's guess was correct. He whispered, How did you figure it out? Emotinga glanced at Hoopa's left hand and said, Look at his fingers. Qinshi followed her line of sight and saw that Hoopa's left pinky was missing half. He then thought of the Qilin bone fairy Fengqing obtained and understood. Emotinga continued, Not only that, but there's a silver ring on his wrist. It's not a bracelet, but a restriction that imprisons him here. When he came here just now, I saw the silver ring light up. Qinshi looked again and saw there was indeed a silver ring on Hoopa's wrist. He sighed. You're really observant. Emotinga smiled. I'm very sensitive to restrictions. I noticed it as soon as the silver ring lit up. So, he doesn't have the ability to take our lives. I think so. At most, he'll make us suffer a little. Emotinga paused for a moment then said, But I want to be on good terms with him. First, he doesn't have any evil intentions towards us. Second, I think he must have a big secret. Qinshi nodded slightly. He already knew what Hoopa said, but he didn't ask because he thought their lives were in his hands. The two of them looked at Hoopa. Hoopa was sneering at them. Although he was imprisoned on the side of the plaque, he was, after all, an existence far beyond the current cultivation world. Even if he couldn't read minds, how could the two of them hide their voices from him? Senior, Emotinga said, Have you made up your mind? Hoopa said coldly, Even if you guessed correctly, so what? You can't hurt me or let me out, so why should I talk to you? Emotinga said, Senior, I know I can't negotiate with you, so it's up to you whether you're willing or not. Hoopa continued to sneer. Do you think I'll be moved by your words and say anything? Emotinga rolled her eyes. As a divine beast that lived for tens of thousands of years, he was actually so calculative. Qinshi asked, Senior, may I ask where you came from? As a divine beast, why did it stay in the human world? What is the Meru Ocean? What do you mean by, the world will be in chaos and the time of reincarnation? This time, it was Hoopa's turn to roll his eyes. He hadn't even said whether he was going to answer or not, and he actually asked all the questions in one go. He simply lay down on the horizontal board and pretended to rest, completely ignoring them. "Senior." The person below called again. Hoopip curled his lips and pretended to be dead. She called him a few more times but didn't get any response, so she said, "Since Senior doesn't want to talk to us, let's take a rest first." The two of them then discussed how to settle down and how to leave, minding their own business and treating this place as their own Immortal's cave. Hoopa, who was sitting on the horizontal board, was enraged. He gnashed his teeth and glared at them several times, but then he felt bored and turned his head away to ignore them. The first thing Tienga and Qin wanted to do was to enter the Immortal Palace. However, they discovered that the Immortal Palace was sealed by restrictions and couldn't be opened, so they could only find a corner outside to settle down. At that moment, Fairy Feng Qin jumped out of the illusion. When she saw the two of them, she was shocked at first, but then she became angry. She took 2 steps forward, stood in front of them, and asked angrily, "Why are you here?" Recalling the scene in the illusion, Tienga didn't even feel like showing enough courtesy on the surface. She said, "Why can't we be here?" Fairy Feng Qin was furious. "You followed me. So what if I did?" Tienga looked at her mockingly. "You've..." Fairy Feng Qin flew into a rage. She was about to scold them when she suddenly saw Qin Shi looking at her indifferently. She was shocked. She almost forgot that Qin Shojing was already in the middle stage of the nascent soul realm. With the two of them here, she absolutely couldn't defeat them. But was she going to let it go just like that? When she, Feng Qin, formed her nascent soul, she didn't even know where these two people were. But now, she was going to be bullied by 2 juniors. Tienga said lazily, "Fellow Daoist Feng Qin, maybe you don't know, but aside from being a guest elder of Bishuan Court, the founder of Bishuan Court is my family's great ancestor. You're using Bishuan Court's things to seek fated chances, how could I not get involved?" Fairy Feng Qin was stunned and said, "Are you talking nonsense?" "Fellow Daoist Feng Qin," Tienga said coldly, "even if I'm your junior several hundred years from now, I'm still a nascent soul cultivator now. How could a nascent soul cultivator talk nonsense?" Fairy Feng Qin said that because she subconsciously didn't consider Tienga a nascent soul cultivator. This Fairy Feng Qin didn't hate her for no reason, but she was always aggressive. She didn't care about the first time, she could laugh it off the second time, but how could she keep giving in to her 3 or 4 times? Although she was young, she was still a genuine nascent soul cultivator. Fairy Feng Qin was furious inside, but she didn't dare to show it. She'd always been self-conscious about her status, thinking these two people were juniors. This kind of mentality affected her behavior unconsciously. Now that Tienga was mocking them, she couldn't say anything. Thinking up to this point, she felt somewhat indignant, so she finally snorted coldly. "What's the point of having a backer?" Tienga was surprised. She turned to Qin Shi and asked, "Backer? Is she talking about you?" Qin Shi smiled. "Probably." "Oh." She looked back and said to Fairy Feng Qin seriously, "Are you envious?" Fairy Feng Qin's face turned green and white. She was so angry that she blurted out, "Who's envious?" Relying on a man to succeed, shameless. Then you're envious. Tienga nodded and looked at her sympathetically. It's been more than 700 years, but you can't even get a man. It's quite miserable. Qingwei, what nonsense are you talking about? Fairy Feng Qin was extremely ashamed and resentful. She wanted to teach her a lesson, but she was worried about Qin Shi, so she was in a dilemma. "That's not nonsense," the amber on the horizontal board suddenly said. "If you didn't have jealousy in your heart, you wouldn't have such an illusion." The 3 of them were stunned. Shi was the first to return to his senses. He asked, "Senior, do you know what illusion we had?" Hoopa snorted and said, "Of course I know. I made up the illusion." Ha! Mo Tienga and Shi looked at each other in astonishment. Now they all knew that Hoopa was imprisoned here and that the formation around them was probably to trap him. If he could control the illusion, wouldn't it be useless? As if he knew what they were thinking, Hoopa snorted and said, "Our Chilan clan is innately mysterious. What's a small illusion?" He then pulled the silver ring on his wrist impatiently. If it weren't for this thing, how could he have been trapped here for so long? So it's because of your innate talent. Shi nodded lightly. Senior is trapped here, but you can still control it freely. Your strength must be extraordinary. Hoopa turned to look at him with a faint smile. You don't need to test me. I won't tell you these things. Shi said, "Senior, if you want to tell me, then tell me. If you don't, then forget it. It's not good for us to know these old things." "Don't say it like you don't have any desires," Hoopa mocked. "You cultivators came to the Immortal Palace for treasures. Unfortunately, there's nothing here except for me. Whether you can get out or not is a problem." "That's right," Mo Tienga said, "in any case, we can't get any benefits. If Senior likes to tell stories, we'll listen. If you don't tell stories, we won't lose anything." After a moment of silence, Hoopa couldn't help but ask, "Hey, how did you two break the illusion?" He had been trapped alone for too long. He was so lonely that he could pretend to be playing happily with the 9 interlocking rings, so he was very happy to have someone to talk to relieve his boredom. Mo Tienga and Shi looked at each other with smiles in their eyes. Mo Tienga said, "There are 2 reasons why Senior's illusion failed. First, what happened in the illusion didn't match our experience and personality. Second, Senior ignored our feelings." Hoopa was stunned. He sat up and asked, "What do you mean?" Mo Tienga said, "Let's talk about me. Does Senior know my background?" Hoopa waved his hand and said, "You're young and high-spirited. You're probably the child of an aristocratic family." Mo Tienga pointed at Shi. "What about him?" Hoopa glanced at her then said carelessly, "He's still young, but he's like an old man. He must have come from a poor family, so he's always thinking about things." Shi was speechless. This was the first time he encountered a situation where others thought he was a child of a poor family. Mo Tienga was also speechless. Just as she was about to speak, Hoopa said in surprise, "Aw, I guessed wrong." Mo Tienga frowned and said unhappily, "Senior, can you not use the mind-reading technique? If you use the mind-reading technique, what's the point of talking?" "Fine," Hoopa urged, "what's going on?" Mo Tienga said, "I was born in a village in the secular world. I didn't have a father since I was a child, and my mother died when I was young. Before I became an adult, I followed my uncle and wandered around. Later, I became a disciple of my master and finally reached the sky in a single bound." Hoopa scratched his head then pointed at Shi. "What about him?" Mo Tienga said, "When he was immortal, he was a child of a prince's mansion. Once he entered the school of immortality, he became the beloved disciple of a nascent soul cultivator." "Nascent soul isn't that high," Hoopa muttered, but Mo Tienga glared at him again. "Not high. Does he think we're in the Middle Ages or the distant past era?" Mo Tienga continued, "Look, what kind of lousy identity did you give us? And that lousy plot doesn't fit our character at all, okay? Why doesn't it fit? Isn't it fun for a loving husband and wife to have a falling out with each other?" Hoopa asked with a pair of curious and innocent eyes. Mo Tienga felt helpless. "We're cultivators, okay? All of them cultivated their state of mind, all right. To put it simply, if he really had a blood feud with me, he wouldn't have married me because it would have implicated the innocent. If I really became a husband and betrayed the sect, I wouldn't have been beaten half to death, and I definitely wouldn't have confronted him with weapons. Why? Hupit decided to get to the bottom of it. Because our relationship is deep, betrayal is even more intolerable, right? It's wrong to put it on me. Then what will you do? Mo Tiangev paused, then said, why should I tell you to make the illusion more realistic next time? Pfft. Hupis said, this time, I'm just too unfamiliar with it. If there's a next time, I'll definitely trap you in the illusion and never come out. Unfortunately, there's still the second point. No matter how realistic Senior's illusion is, feelings can't be fake. In the illusion, I have no feelings for my illusory parents. It'll be the same even if I do it again. Humph. Next time, I won't make it up like this. Senior. Fairy Fengqing suddenly spoke. Hu Po's gaze froze and he said coldly, Junior, it's very rude of you to interrupt. He flicked his sleeve and was about to punish her, but he heard Fairy Fengqing say loudly, Senior, Junior has something to give to Senior. Chapter 601. Fairy Fengqing took something out of her robe and held it in her hand for Hoopa to look at. It was the Qilin bone. Hoopa looked at it with a dark and complicated gaze. After a while, he sighed. What do you want? I've been imprisoned here, and my aura has been sealed. Only my immortal body remains. If your request is too much, I'm afraid I can't do it. Fairy Fengqing said, I don't want anything. I only ask Senior to let me out. Let you out? Hupit smiled bitterly. If I could break the formation here, how could I have been imprisoned for more than 100,000 years? I can't satisfy your request. Fairy Fengqing was stunned. Senior, can't you control illusions? I can only make the illusions I want it to produce, but I can't control it. Besides, this place isn't just an illusion. I haven't escaped for tens of thousands of years because this place is like an inescapable net. The more Fairy Fengqing listened, the paler her face became. In the end, she said in a trembling voice, Do I have to be trapped here forever? Hupis said faintly, You have lifespan, so how can there be forever? When your lifespan is up, you'll be free. Fairy Fengqing stared at him blankly. Seeing his indifferent expression, which didn't look like he was lying to her, she suddenly lost her strength and fell to the ground. How can it be? What's the difference between being trapped here and dying? I haven't lived long enough. I'm only 700 years old. I still have another 700 or 800 years to live. I don't want to be trapped here. She looked panicked and her voice was mournful, but no one comforted her. Hu Po's expression was still indifferent without a trace of sympathy. For a monster like him who had lived for tens of thousands of years, there was nothing to sympathize with. His gaze fell on Mo Tiange and Qin Shi, and he said playfully, Why aren't you afraid? Mo Tiange curled her lips and said, If we can break the formation and restrictions in this place, won't we be able to leave? Hu Po was surprised. You think you can break it? Mo Tiange didn't answer his question. This place is full of spiritual aura. It's a good place to cultivate. She thought to herself, it's not like this hasn't happened before. Back when they were trapped in the Immortal Palace in the Returning Sea, if they hadn't gathered 4 people and 1 puppet, they would have never been able to escape. Now that it had happened again, it wasn't that scary. Don't forget, they had the mystic void cloud formation in their hands. Even if they didn't have enough people, after 30 to 50 years, with the help of the Vermilion Bird's breath and the Azure Dragon's breath, Xiaofan and Xiaohua would be able to advance to the 8th rank. With the addition of the puppets, they could set up the mystic void cloud formation. Hoopa said, looks like the two of you are pure Tao cultivators. Among all the Taoist cultivators, Taoist and Buddhist cultivators placed the most emphasis on the state of mind. Knowing that the array here could not be broken, Fairy Finching's reaction was completely different from the two of them. It was enough to distinguish their paths. This matter also proved what Qin Shi said. Other Taoists indeed didn't need to cultivate one's mental state, but they'd often come to a halt halfway. Although the path of Tao cultivation was arduous and full of misgivings, as long as one persevered, the path would be smooth sailing. Senior! Fairy Fengqing shouted hoarsely, don't you want this Qilin bone anymore? Hu Po's expression darkened, but in the end, he said faintly, immortal and indestructible existences like me could have regrown limbs long ago. I only kept this bit of regret to remind myself of the past. You're too self-righteous. Once he finished speaking, he flicked his sleeve and took back the Qilin bone in Fairy Finching's hand. He said indifferently, this thing originally belonged to my body, so I have the right to take it back. As a reward for finding it, as long as you're here, I'll protect your life. Fairy Fengqing smiled bitterly. There was neither heaven nor earth here. Aside from her, there were only Qin Shoujing and Imo Qingwei, so how could she be in danger? She didn't know that Hoopa made this promise because he sensed her killing intent towards Imo Tiange and Qin Shi. Seeing that Fairy Fengqing had suffered a huge blow, Imo Tiange sighed and asked, Senior, who laid the formation and restriction here? Hoopa glanced at her and said, what? You want to hear another story? Imo Tiange widened her eyes. You can't tell me that. Hu Po's lips curled up slightly. It's useless even if I tell you. That's an existence far surpassing you. Then it's the Middle Ages or remote antiquity era. Are you trying to get information out of me? Hoopa hugged his knees and smiled. In fact, there's no harm in telling you. In our world, there were still people who ascended and became immortals. Sure enough, it was the Middle Ages or remote antiquity era. That meant this senior Hoopa had lived for at least more than 100,000 years. He claimed to be an immortal and indestructible existence. Could it be that he had already met the conditions for ascension but was stuck in the human world for some reason? Then why are you trapped here, Senior? With Senior's cultivation level, who has the ability to imprison you for more than 100,000 years? Hoopa closed his eyes and didn't say anything for a long time. In the end, he sighed faintly and said, it's useless to tell you now. Because our cultivation levels are too low. Hoopa glanced at them but didn't answer. The answer was obvious. He had been imprisoned here for tens of thousands of years, and this was the first time he met an outsider. However, he didn't seem to want their help at all, so this wasn't something they could help with. Then, Senior, what kind of formation is this? Hoopa lay down, but he just waved his hand and said vaguely, don't bother me. Imo Tiange had to give up. Since she couldn't get out for the time being, she would have plenty of time to bother him later. Just as she thought that, Hoopa suddenly opened his eyes and sat up. Someone's here again. Imo Tiange immediately thought it was those beast cultivators. Hoopa made a hand seal and pushed it outward. The sea of clouds suddenly surged and rippled like water. In the rippling light, several beast cultivators appeared. These beast cultivators were also trapped in an illusion. There was nothing around them, but they made all kinds of movements, sometimes happy, sometimes angry. Xiao Feng was among them. Seeing Black Sun Demon Lord's figure, Hoopa narrowed his eyes. Qilin bloodline, Imo Tiange's heart skipped a beat. That Black Sun Demon Lord was from the Qilin clan, so Hoopa definitely wouldn't make things difficult for them. If they came here, would he want to kill them? At this thought, she looked at Qin Shi. She couldn't send him a voice transmission, so she could only give him a look. Qin Shi shook his head at her. She didn't know whether he was saying she didn't need to care or it wouldn't happen. After Hoopa intervened, the beast cultivators experienced an easier time. They broke the illusion one after another and came out. The first beast cultivator to come out was a sloppy, black-skinned man. He was Enrich, the loach. He saw Mo Tienga and Chin Shi first. Ha! He pointed at them and said, "Are you humans?" Chin Shi took a step forward. "Yes, I'm Kunwu cultivator Chin Shoujing, and this is my wife Mo Qingwei. May I know your name?" His words were polite and didn't have any difference between humans and demons. He seemed to treat Chin Shi as one of his kind. Enrich grinned and cupped his hands like Chin Shi did. Enrich, a beast cultivator from the South Sea. My original form is a loach. Hearing the word loach, Chin Shi's heart skipped a beat. He remembered that when he was guarding the formation, he once killed a loach in the heaven and earth upside-down formation. It was said that it was very difficult for a loach to become a beast. Could it be such a coincidence that they were relatives? Enrich didn't know what Chin Shi was thinking. He glanced at Fairy Feng Qing, who was in a daze in the corner, then looked at Hoopa on the horizontal board. He uttered an "aw" and asked, "Are you also a member of our beast clan?" Hoopa lazily looked up. He was a divine beast with the noblest bloodline, but Enrich in front of him was a loach with the lowest bloodline among demonic beasts. This surprised him. "You're actually a loach. Boy, you're quite lucky." Enrich chuckled and touched his head. He asked, "Which clan are you from? Although I know you should be a beast, I can't feel your breath." "Are you sealed?" Hoopa corrected him. "We're from the spirit clan, not the beast clan." Enrich uttered an "aw" and looked at Hoopa in confusion. Hoopa said, "Don't be misled by humans. Humans are the most selfish. If you're used by them, you're called spiritual beasts. If you're not used by them, you're called demonic beasts. In fact, after we ascended, we went to the spiritual realm, so of course, we're from the spirit clan, not the beast clan." Enrich actually thought about it seriously and finally nodded. "What you said makes sense. We cultivate spiritual energy, so of course, we're from the spirit clan. You're worth teaching." Hoopa smiled. Enrich slapped his head and asked again, "You still haven't told me which clan you're from." Hoopa said, "The Qilin clan." "Qilin." Enrich's hand that was touching his head paused. He pulled out a large piece of black mud, but stopped in midair. He raised his head and looked at Hoopa in shock. Is there a problem?" Hoopa was still lazy. Enrich slapped his head again and knelt down. Enrich greet Sir Godly Lord. Sir Godly Lord, what a distant title. Hoopa sighed in his heart and asked, "How do you know that I'm a divine beast?" Enrich said, "Sir Godly Lord, we came here because of the holy object's hint. We specifically came to look for the Godly Lord's residence, but we didn't expect that the Godly Lord is still here." Hoopa's expression turned serious. He sat up and stared at him. "You're a demonic cultivator from the Shumi Sea." "That's right," Enrich reported. "I came to protect the eldest prince." "The eldest prince?" Hoopa murmured and turned to look at Black Sun Demon Monarch's figure in the sea of clouds. Hoopa could tell at a glance that this person had the bloodline of a Qilin, but he didn't expect it to be the bloodline he deliberately left behind. The bloodline of the eldest prince of the Shumi Sea has actually thinned to this extent. It seems they were forced to come here. If they didn't come, their bloodline wouldn't be enough to support their appearances. Hoopa thought about it and became even sadder. "I'm trapped here. Even if they come, what can they do? I can't send them out and can only watch them die with me." Enrich didn't know the ups and downs in Hoopa's heart. He saw another person jumping out of the illusion. It was the other 10th-ranked demonic cultivator, Elder Jing. Once Elder Jing jumped out, he cast a vigilant glance at Imo Tiange and the others, then asked Enrich, "Where's the eldest prince?" Enrich pointed at the sea of clouds. "The eldest prince hasn't come out yet." Elder Jing looked at the scene reflected in the sea of clouds. The eldest prince's face was full of anger, and he seemed to be arguing. Elder Jing was secretly anxious. Black Sun Demon Monarch didn't look like he was going to break the illusion at all. He mustn't be tempted by the illusion and court his own death. The third person to jump out of the illusion was actually Jean Jing. She timidly glanced at Imo Tiange and Qin. She then gulped and asked, "Elder, these two are..." You're tuning into the LoveLore Library YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.